On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 4.
Good afternoon, I'm Zora Suleiman. In the last hour, police in Liverpool have confirmed that 2 guns were used in the fatal shooting of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell. She was killed after being shot by a masked gunman who had chased another man into her home on Monday last week. Detectives have now released new CCTV footage of the man they believe murdered her, describing him as toxic to the community.
Now, I know that there will be people shielding him and helping this man avoid being found by the police. If you are found doing this, then we will do everything legitimately possible to bring you to justice. It is beyond comprehension how anyone could protect or harbour a man who's responsible for killing a 9-year-old child.
Boris Johnson has pledged £700 million to build a new nuclear power plant on the Suffolk coast. During what is likely to be his final major policy speech as Prime Minister, he said he was confident the Sizewell C project will get over the line in the next few weeks. He's urged his successor to go nuclear, go large, because the war in Ukraine has demonstrated the need for more nuclear generation capacity in the UK.
It will help to fix the energy needs, not just of this generation, but of the next. A baby born this year will be getting energy from Sizewell C long, long after she retires.
Meanwhile, inspectors from the UN's nuclear watchdog have arrived at the Zaporizhzhia plant in Ukraine. It's after reports of multiple explosions and shelling close to the facility, which caused it to partially shut down. Fighting near the Russian-controlled area has sparked fears of a nuclear disaster. Vladimir Putin won't attend Mikhail Gorbachev's funeral this weekend because of scheduling constraints. The final leader of the Soviet Union died on Tuesday at the age of 91. But the Kremlin insists the Russian president has already paid his respects by visiting the hospital where his body lay earlier today. Bill Turnbull's wife has paid tribute to him as being the heart of the family. The former BBC Breakfast host has died at the age of 66 after his battle with prostate cancer. In a statement, Sarah McCombie recalled how he made his family laugh every day and said they're immensely proud of him. And a momentous moment for Twitter users with the launch of an edit button for some. It will allow paying subscribers to change their tweet up to 30 minutes after posting it, but you will still see the old version. That's the latest. Now time for today's weather.
Times Puzzles sponsors Talk TV Weather.
Hello, it's the first day of meteorological autumn today, but it's not actually feeling that autumnal out there for today, and that's because we've just about got high pressure in charge, as you can see. But over the next 24 hours or so, we are going to see that jet stream dip its way southwards. That means it's going to allow low pressure systems to come in off the Atlantic with spells of rain and strong winds as we head into the weekend. It's really going to feel quite autumnal then. Before then, though, we continue with mostly fine conditions for the rest of this afternoon. There's a little bit of cloud bubbling up across parts of northern and eastern England, producing the odd light shower or two across these areas, but they are well scattered. Everywhere else looks mostly fine, but as we head towards the latter part of this afternoon and towards this evening, I think we are going to see some heavy showers crop up around central and southern parts of England and Wales, particularly across the southwest. Still feeling fairly fine in any sunshine, though. And then into tonight, showers continuing for a time across central and southern areas. Otherwise, it's mostly dry and clear around northern and eastern parts with a little bit of low cloud. Then tomorrow, it's looking quite wet still with some heavy showers across southern parts of the UK. Further north and west as well, we see a front approaching with spells of heavy rain and rather brisk winds too. And then, as I mentioned, into the weekend, it's going to turn rather wet and windy for many.
Times Puzzles sponsors Talk TV Weather.
The biggest issue in Britain right now is the cost of living crisis. Energy bills have become ridiculous. Second biggest issue, extraordinarily, is nobody can define what a woman is.
And a very good afternoon to one and all. Welcome to Drive Time with Isabel and I. Is it I, is it me, or is it Richard?
Don't start that.
Don't start that again.
Don't start that.
Anyway, we're here for the next 3 hours, of course. This Drive Time after yesterday's sort of fun first chat and presentation.
Were you trying to say experiment?
Experiment, that's the word, exactly, experiment.
You know what I'm liking about this? I'm taller than you.
Oh,
I'm nearly equal.
Production team, we have to sort this out. Anyway, we've got an action-packed, full-on 3-hour show ahead until 7 o'clock. In the first hour, we'll, of course, be getting the political update from Peter Cardwell. The news is changing, and thankfully, just a few days to go. Oh, are we bored of this?
Well, I think even the people that are working on the campaigns are bored of it now. You've got to feel sorry for them. They all know what the outcome's going to be. We think we know anyway. They just want it over with.
But we're going to be having a lot of chat about motorways, faster motorways, slower motorways, and that's one of our big questions. In the second hour, we're going to be talking, obviously, about the predictions of the huge reduction in disposable income, and we also need to talk about the COVID inquiry. There hasn't been much chat about that because it's barely started. Sweden have finished theirs, so we'll be talking about that. And then in the third hour, we need to look at the issue of trials, don't we? Retrials. What's fair?
Yeah, so this is on the back of the Ryan Giggs trial, which effectively collapsed because the jury failed to reach a verdict. And now, whatever you think of the rights and wrongs of the case, it looks like he may well be facing a whole other trial, and he might have to wait a year for that, as might the person that is perhaps the alleged victim in this case. So not an easy situation at all. Is that fair on anyone?
Is that fair or not fair, as you say, on anyone? And then also we're going to be talking about care homes, because, again, there's been very little chat, but actually there are still huge restrictions in care homes, and we've got a great guest.
COVID-related.
COVID-related restrictions on care home residents and visitors, which just seems extraordinary. Very little chat on that.
They're kind of the forgotten victims,
they really
aren't they?
are.
So we would absolutely love to hear from anyone with experiences of that, maybe with a relative in a care home, so on.
Exactly, any experiences. And what a day this is, the 1st of September, because this was the day in 1939, of course, that Germany invaded Poland, and that was the start of World War II. Some of you may remember in 1981, this was the very same day that petrol started being sold in litres as opposed to gallons. Imagine how much a gallon of petrol or diesel is. Maybe that was a cunning plan. And this is particularly topical, I think. In 1989, on this day, the 1st of September, guess what the Tories did?
Well, I don't know, because I was too young, but you can probably remember
I can just about remember. The Tories started the process of privatising the water companies. We all know how well that's worked out this summer, don't we? And then the other, this day, in 2000, again, very topical. In the year 2000, on this day, the first stowaways were discovered on the trains going through the Channel Tunnel from France, the first of the illegal migrants. Do you remember that? As they were jumping on and off trains and then putting up the fences. That was exactly 22 years ago. So we got some great guests through the show, and our big question to everybody. Do you want to read the first question out?
So the first question is, do you think motorway speed limits should be raised? Liz Truss has hinted that she might actually raise the motorway speed limit, which is, you probably don't know this, but 70 miles an hour.
Of course I know the speed limit.
So if they should be raised, what should they be raised to? Should they be left as they are? I was doing a little bit of research about this, into speed limits in general. Who knew that there's a Wikipedia page for the history of speed limits? So it's all glamour here. The Motorway Act of 1903 first raised the speed limit to 20 miles an hour. And then in 1930, all speed limits were abolished. You'd like that, wouldn't you?
I'm loving that act.
And actually, the reason they were abolished is because the minister said at the time that they were so universally disobeyed that the maintenance of that law was bringing it into disrepute, effectively.
That minister could become my new best friend.
And interestingly, when they scrapped the law and they abolished the speed limits, the number of fatalities actually dropped. Oh. So that, I think, is super interesting. Now, that was another era, but the current legislation, the 70 miles an hour limit, actually dates back to, I have the date here, 1967. So it's over 50 years old, this 70 miles an hour limit. And you might like to think that technology on our cars has got a little bit more sophisticated, that brake systems are better.
Absolutely.
You know, those warning things that you get.
Give us a call, 0344 499 1000, with your views. What should happen to speed limits? We'll be taking that throughout the show, or text us 87222, or send us a tweet. And we'll be going now to our first guest of the show to discuss exactly this, a motoring journalist and broadcaster, Quentin Wilson. Quentin, thank you very much for joining us on Drive Time this afternoon. You presumably knew all of those times and dates and acts of the speed limits. What do you think of Liz Truss's announcement yesterday, very belated in the campaign, that she would review or axe the motorway speed limit?
Well, let's not get carried away. This is just an answer she made a question at the hustings last night when asked, would you do something about smart motorways and make speed limits mandatory? The smart motorways, absolutely, get rid of them. You are 3 times more likely to die if you break down on a smart motorway than if you break down on a traditional motorway. And people like me and the IAO and the RAC have been saying these are just a waste of money and building road capacity on the cheap. So absolutely, get rid of that. The idea that the Foreign Secretary wants to get away with speed limits completely is a bit tricky. And she did mention this back in 2018 when she was Chief Secretary to the Treasury. The problem is that we have a national speed limit at 70 miles an hour, as you've just said, and people on motorways drive at about 80, 85, which don't write in. We know that's illegal, but it's really difficult to enforce it because if you rigidly stick to 70, then you get bunching. But the problem is if you raise it now to 80 miles an hour, then everybody would drive at 90, 95. Now, we have a driving skills crisis in this country. You say cars have changed. Yes, they have technologically. People, though, haven't. And the skill to be able...
you.
He's not looking at me.
Skills to be able to stop a car at 95 miles an hour are much more than just standing on the brake pedal. So I think there's a big issue there that it would decrease road safety. And also cars aren't being well maintained anymore with the pandemic, the fact that people are short of money, they're not being serviced like they should, and tyres are old and brake pads are worn. So I think this would be a recipe for disaster, and I would stick to your 70 mile an hour limit and understand that most people travel at 80, 85 on motorways.
I mean, you make a really interesting point there about cars not being serviced as much as they used to be, and I would hazard a guess that that's because it's unbelievably expensive to get your car serviced. I have a really ancient car. Nothing fancy about my old, what is it? I don't even know what it is. It's an old diesel thing, 2010. And to get that serviced, I think was about £270. I've got another vehicle which is equally clapped out, and again that was about £400. So I mean, who is voluntarily going to do this if they're feeling the pinch? It's one of those it's a luxury, really, isn't it?
Well, it shouldn't be a luxury, but you're right. And we are seeing this across the industry, that cars are coming back into the system where they've missed services. I mean, I saw one the other day that hadn't had a service for 2 years and 27,000 miles. So, those tyres, those brakes, those brake discs, they're not going to be great. So the idea of people travelling at 95 miles an hour on motorways with cars that just aren't in tip-top condition completely terrifies me.
Well, this will terrify you even more then, Quentin, because Greg has just messaged in saying the 70 mile an hour speed limit was introduced after an AC Cobra was clocked at 200 miles an hour on the motorway on a test drive.
Yeah, even you can't do that.
You're absolutely right.
But actually, Quentin, is there evidence of people driving a bit slower to save fuel, for example, to reduce expenditure?
Well, anecdotally, perhaps you see people driving a bit more slowly, but the sales of fuel really haven't gone down that much, even though the high prices, it's almost infinitesimal, the amount that the fuel sales have declined. So I don't see it. I mean, people still waft past me at 100 miles an hour on the M40. So I just think it's a worrying line of inquiry, and I don't think speed limits should be advisory. What you can do is take away those speed limit on the variable things, which come in at 3 o'clock at night, and then go down to 30, and then up to 40, and then down to 30 again. I mean, people have completely lost confidence in all that smart motorway system.
But perhaps while you're on, you can answer a question that's always bugged me. How much difference does it make if you don't have the aircon on in your car? Because I've noticed with some of the Uber drivers and things, even on a sweltering day, they're very reluctant to put the aircon on. Does that actually make much difference to fuel consumption?
It does, and it can make as much as 10%.
Wow.
Because you load the engine, because the air conditioning compressor has to go on, which puts more strain on the engine, takes away more power. So yeah, it's a known fact that you can lose up to 10% energy from running your aircon.
Well, there you go.
There you go. Meanwhile,
been a bit extravagant on that one.
Bit extravagant. Another message comes in. Speed limits is a strange thing to focus on. The main issue is we're introducing barriers to drivers in cities because of cycle lanes. That's another whole topic. That's another whole topic. And Quentin, obviously, the other side from the motorways is the reduction in many urban environments from 30 down to 20. And do you think there's how are people feeling about that? Do you think there's any pressure to keep that, to discuss about going back to 25 or 30? What's the mood amongst the experts?
Well, people don't like it. It's extremely unpopular. But the fact is that if you hit somebody at 30 miles an hour, you're going to do a lot more damage than if you hit them at 20. So I think in built-up areas, outside schools, outside hospitals, that sort of thing, it's absolutely right. But a blanket 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, as we do have in some places, is a bit too much, and it causes more congestion and more pollution and more anger. So again, all these speed limit things need to be applied with empirical road safety evidence to justify why they're there and to take the public with them. And for too long, we've had a remote camera policing culture in this country, and those speed cameras have not shown to actually reduce fatalities significantly. We've plateaued at the fatalities at around 1,200 a year, and that's got to come down, obviously, but we need to be much more scientific about it and engineer better roads, because certainly in the smart motorways, this is a disaster waiting to happen. It has already happened, and 53 people have died in the 4 years up to 2019.
They're very difficult to kind of unravel them, though, isn't it? I mean, some of these things are already, either they're complete or some are mid-construction. You see often that the sites are sort of fairly deserted, but that's fairly characteristic of most of our roadworks anyway. Can you honestly see them being, construction being reversed? And how many years of motoring misery have we got while they do all of that?
Well, it is, you're right, a Pandora's box now, because the ones that have been put in place, they need to have many, many, many more refuge areas. And will that still make them safe enough? Yeah. The ones that are part-way constructed, do you unpick it all and put the hard shoulders back in? Then you've got to ask the question, how much has been spent on this taxpayer money? And whose idea was it to build road capacity on the cheap? And are they accountable?
Oh, well, there you are. You're asking a really, really sort of common sense question, Quentin, which is, should people be held to account? I'm not really sure that really happens. We've got to go to the break. Quentin, thank you so much for that. Lots of common sense and thoughts there from Quentin Wilson, the motoring journalist and broadcaster. Really appreciate that. Coming after the break, we'll be taking your calls, a bit of chat, lots of messages and tweets coming in. Keep them coming. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Drive Time with Isabel and Richard. Welcome back, my friends. We've got loads of tweets and messages coming in about the speed limits, which is absolutely fascinating. One here from Dan, who says smart motorways will be the Highways Agency's Hillsborough disaster in time. They're the infrastructure for the impending carbon footprint surveillance state. Interesting. Well, there we are. That's a bit Big Brother, isn't it? What have you got there?
Yeah, I think you were basically just disappointed that the expert that we had on, Quentin, wasn't kind of saying, yeah, definitely these speed limits are going to be raised, because the truth is you quite like a bit of speeding, isn't it?
Well, just, you know, a bit of history, just sort of memory down memory lane.
Anything to confess?
Well, I think this is probably the moment when I have to admit that I think I've mellowed as I've aged. In my 20s, I was probably not quite good enough at abiding by the speed limit. Do I need to go any further than that?
I think we need the full disclosure.
You need the full disclosure.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah. No secrets here.
No secrets here. Yes, I will confess. But I do need anybody else's experiences to share the pain with me. That I did spend about almost 12 months on the grand total of 9 points.
And have you ever done any speeding awareness courses?
Well, possibly. I do quite like the online ones now, the Zoom ones.
Oh, I didn't even know that was an option.
Well, yes, it's a great option. It's great for the speed awareness companies as well. They save loads of money. They still charge you the same fee, but they've got a very clever mechanism to make sure that you are actually online and that you're not falling asleep.
Right.
Or doing something else.
How do they do that?
I don't know, but they've made it very clear that they know, and you have to sort of pay attention and keep your eyelids open. It's
my goodness.
Yeah. So anyway, so lots of other messages coming in here about the speeding. Who've we got here? Speed limits would. Oh, here we are. Now I like this one from Lynn. Lynn says, speed limitless would free up the police to do a proper job.
See, I just think it would be a complete disaster. I mean, can you imagine? You already see nutters going along, and I can't see how this is going to end well to make it speed limit. And look, you know, we can live in a fantasy land, but it isn't going to happen. However, what do we have here? We have someone saying, at the very least, I believe speed limits should be changed to the same as cars in national speed limits, as modern vans are much better built, and my Transit certainly drives as well as my own car. So with vans, they have a lower speed limit, do they?
That's right. Well, help me, because I'm not actually sure is the honest answer. So give us a call or send us a message if you know the answer to that. What I do find strange is when you're in the middle lane of a motorway and a van just careers past you in the outside lane, and you're thinking, is that right?
You're just jealous, right?
Well, a little bit. You know, I'm trying to be good, as I say, I'm trying to mellow and play by the rules and abide by the rules.
First time for everything.
First time for everything.
By the way, I mean, full disclosure here, I've got 3 points, and my 3 points were acquired nearly 3 years ago, so I think I'm about to lose them, because they get wiped out, don't they? And it was for the terrible crime of going 34 miles an hour in a 30-mile speed limit. I mean, really?
So should there be any form of discretion applied? I mean, is that a moment for discretion?
Or is it just a way for people to make money from the speed cameras? Because there are those cameras, aren't there, the ones that actually bring in literally millions of pounds?
I mean, that is really the point. It's a bit like the low-traffic neighbourhoods. They're bringing in millions of pounds for councils in urban areas for essentially driving down a street that you always used to drive down. Doesn't seem very fair to me. But anyway, lots of other messages coming in here. This is Hugo. Goodness me, talking about speeding, and Hugo thinks that we could be in number 10 within 5 years. I'm not quite sure how. Maybe we could speed into number 10 or no.
There's no fast route to that,
There's no fast route to that at all. Now, here's actually Angela has said she asked Surrey Highways and her MP to put a 30 mile an hour and slow down signs in schools and things is used as a cut through, and cars speed at 40 plus regularly, and they refused. Actually, that's surprising, because generally I think councils are very good at putting extra speed limits and speed awareness bumps at schools and things.
Yeah, no, they absolutely are. And but we're quite low on speed bumps in this country, aren't we? I mean, we were abroad recently and there were speed bumps everywhere. And those, I mean, when they're badly marked, they're just a hazard for your vehicle, aren't they, really?
I did read about the speed bumps that have just been installed by a council here in the UK, and guess what? They put them to the wrong height.
Oh, you're kidding me.
All the cars,
taking out the underside
literally
of the
taking out the underside of the cars, and they've now got to reduce them. Anyway, let's go to our first caller of Drive Time, which is Emma in London. Good afternoon, Emma. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm fine. How are you doing?
Great, thank you. Great. So, what are your thoughts on the speed limits? Do you think they're about right? Would you like to see any review of them?
I would like to basically put them stay as they are, because if they do unlimited, they'll have more accidents. And I've went to Germany, and some of them in Germany have basically what they've done. All the autobahns, majority have got speed limits.
But they're advisory, aren't they?
Yeah, they're much more and everything. And usually, the majority of the accidents that happen on the motorways are because people are driving too fast and cutting off each other.
Do you not think, Emma, that the majority of people would be pretty responsible if the speed limits were advisory, and you're always going to get a few people who aren't responsible, but they're the ones that are speeding anyway?
Yes, that's exactly my point. They're speeding anyway. So and as a result of that, you can see so many accidents and people dying every day. Oh, we've got this accident happen. It's a 5-car pile-up and everything.
I mean, in reality, it's the country roads which are more dangerous, generally, aren't they? And I don't have the statistics to hand, but actually, you know, the 50 miles an hour roads, the back roads with the tight corners, a lot of the most fatal accidents happen there.
I've noticed, because I usually listen to traffic news and everything, and what I've noticed is the majority of them have pile-ups on the busy. It's not the side roads; it's the major roads, like the A406.
And that will be because they affect the most drivers, so they would be being on the alert rather than the little country road ones. Well, these are really important points you make.
Yeah, fantastic. Emma, thank you very much for that. Keep those calls coming in. That was Emma in London thinking that actually she's broadly happy with them. Lots of messages coming in here. One very kindly gives me a little bit of advice. Richard, maybe you could just learn to drive a bit more safely. I'm not saying I don't drive safely, but anyway, keep those thoughts and calls coming in. Coming up after the news, we will be talking, of course, to Peter Cardwell, Talk Radio's political editor, about the latest news and views about the hustings, the campaign that thankfully is coming to an end. Are we bored of it?
Well, you've asked that question before, and I'm still a bit bored of it. Yes,
we're completely bored of it. Don't go anywhere.
We're not going to bore you.
You're listening to Isabel and Richard here on Talk TV.
The thing that's really getting up my nose is how many of you moan about the fact that I have an opinion. I've been doing this for over 40 years. Of course I have an opinion. And if you get triggered or you get upset, you shouldn't watch. For the rest of us, an evening of entertainment live on TV and radio. Now, what do you want?
I don't want anything.
Thank you very much indeed.
Top class calls then.
This is Talk TV News.
Good afternoon, I'm Zora Suleiman. Police in Liverpool have confirmed that 2 guns were used in the fatal shooting of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell. She was killed after being shot by a masked gunman who had chased another man into her home on Monday last week. Detectives have now released new CCTV footage of the man they believe murdered her, describing him as toxic to the community.
Now, I know that there will be people shielding him and helping this man avoid being found by the police. If you are found doing this, then we will do everything legitimately possible to bring you to justice. It is beyond comprehension how anyone could protect or harbour a man who's responsible for killing a 9-year-old child.
And some breaking news. In the last half an hour, we are set for more travel chaos in the coming weeks after the RMT union announced a fresh set of strikes. Rail workers will walk out on the 15th and 17th of September in a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and working conditions. Boris Johnson has pledged £700 million to build a new nuclear power plant on the Suffolk coast. During what is likely to be his final major policy speech as Prime Minister, he said he was confident the Sizewell C project will get over the line in the next few weeks. Meanwhile, inspectors from the UN's nuclear watchdog have arrived at the Zaporizhzhia plant in Ukraine. It's after reports of multiple explosions and shelling close to the facility, which caused it to partially shut down. And this summer was England's joint hottest since records began. According to provisional data from the Met Office, the mean temperature was 17.1 degrees Celsius, the same as in 2018. Well, that's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back, my friends, to Drive Time with Isabel and myself, and loads of messages coming in. Lots of advice for me on my driving skills or lack thereof, but anyway.
I don't know how they dare. I wouldn't do that.
But delighted to be joined now in the studio by Peter Cardwell, of course, Talk Radio's political editor, to bring us up to speed, Peter, with the latest news from this ever-grinding on campaign.
Up to speed, Richard? I've heard that's a problem with you, so I mean, I'm not sure that was the right phrase to use necessarily. Yes, well, there's lots going on. It was the last hustings last night of the Conservative leadership election, 12th of 12, and members of the Conservative Party have only got until 5 o'clock tomorrow to get their ballot in. Still quite a few undecided people there last night. I've been speaking to a few of them, actually, who were really impressed by on both candidates. I've been talking to people on all sides of this argument, but who still actually haven't gone online and put their vote in. So there are still some people who will leave it to the very, very last minute. But a really interesting and slightly different hustings last night, I thought, as well. Much more conciliatory. And I think there were warm words for Liz Truss from Rishi Sunak, for example. And I think if that's his kind of last event as a mainstream kind of front-runner politician, well, actually, he will have come out of that pretty well.
And you've been watching this so closely the whole way through. How have you seen the candidates evolve? You know, many would say at the beginning of this, Liz Truss was very wooden. She's not a very confident public performer, and that she's actually really kind of grown more comfortable in her own skin. Whereas Rishi always been very accomplished, very good public performer, very charismatic. Has he in fact sort of conversely lost any of that confidence as it feels progressively as if his candidacy is doomed?
Yeah, he's certainly keeping up the enthusiasm, but he can't help but have a little bit of the weariness, even sort of joking about himself and saying, you might have heard that my dad's a GP and my mum's a pharmacist, for example, sort of taking the hand out of himself. Liz Truss has definitely come on leaps and bounds in terms of both her language and her delivery. We remember in one of the first debates she talked about unicorns and decacorns in terms of these investment and stuff like that, and she doesn't use that kind of language anymore.
She actually looked as though she was enjoying the last couple of hustings and bringing out some new news. And it was very bold what she said, literally putting nailing her colours to the mast, no new taxes.
I was pretty astonished that she said that, actually. Boris Johnson said a similar thing in 2019, but obviously he hasn't got a great relationship with the truth and never has. But in terms of actually committing a government to no new taxes, not just tax cuts, but no new taxes of any kind. She was asked specifically about a windfall tax as well. That is fascinating, and I think that that will be sort of one of those moments. David Cameron talked about split-screen moments where you had the interviewer and interviewing him, and he didn't want to be a hostage to fortune. I think that's going to be really, really interesting for Liz Truss, especially when she did actually, not at the hustings, but in an article for The Sun this morning, she's talking about direct help to people who are having trouble with their bills. So where will that money come from? Will it come from further borrowing? Will it come from existing funds? Or will there have to be new taxes? And again, I sort of mentioned this yesterday, but in terms of kind of campaigning with a pretty right-wing tax-cutting agenda, but possibly having to govern in a much more socialistic way.
Well, one thing you haven't mentioned there is actually spending cuts and whether or not actually the money will come from that through savings. And I'm sure that the Truss campaign has been very, very reluctant through the run-up to this poll to actually talk about that. I mean, no politician wants headlines about their plans to cut spending, but I would have thought that that is the direction that they will have to go down. And, you know, this idea of saying no new taxes, I mean, I confidently predict that that will crumble within the space of a few weeks, if not days, because ultimately, you know, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of different forms of taxes. So she will break that promise, I'm sure. But I think it's a broad brush pledge, isn't it? It's the mood of what she's saying is the mood of her administration will be a tax cutting administration. Definitely, and I think it's really interesting as well when you have not only, I mean, all bits of government. You never have someone from a bit of government or an arm's length body, or no one ever says, you know, I need less money, I want to cut my staff, I want to. But it's really interesting with local government, for example, calling for more money, NHS calling for more money, as it always does, and so on, how whether she'll be able to actually resist those calls and say, especially if they're going to give direct help to people to pay their energy bills. But you're absolutely right, cutting public spending was a policy that worked for the Cameron administration in many respects, or some people think it didn't, but many Conservatives said it worked for David Cameron. Certainly helped him win the 2015 election. So it's an interesting strategy from Liz Truss to do this now, especially when she has been so reluctant to outline any real detail of her rescue plan, and that could come as soon as next week. But I think everybody knows, in all our lives, in all our households, everybody's saying, well, how do I save £5 in 100? And I think people want the truth, the honest truth, and people always see so much waste in government spending, local authority spending, that actually people would quite like to hear a government that says, do you know what, we're actually going to have we're going to stop wasting money all over the place. And easier said than done, organisation, but I know exactly what you mean, and the integrity point is so important as well. Poll after poll saying that integrity, truth, honesty is the most important thing from our politicians, and Liz Truss will hopefully try to get that across when she becomes Prime Minister. The leadership point to be driven down by her and her cabinet and all the ministers, all the MPs, is anybody spending taxpayers' cash, you've literally got to get an extra 10 or 15% value out of what you're spending. And that's even with just the money at the moment. Because of inflation, you're going to have to do that anyway, never mind if there are spending cuts. So it will be fascinating to see how she runs things, and also how reasonable and how on message her new cabinet will be. We're all saying this obviously in the hypothetical scenario that she becomes Prime Minister, but I think it's pretty clear that she will. But whether you have a cabinet, she's sort of said that she wants to bring back some form of obviously cabinet responsibility and wants to empower her ministers to take control of their budgets. But really, really interestingly, what always happens is the cabinet ministers, sometimes some of them anyway, go a bit native and say, well, actually my officials are telling me we need more money for this and more money for this, and we can't do this, this and this, so therefore I'm going to go to the Treasury and ask for more money. There are very few cabinet ministers, maybe Jacob Rees-Mogg, but or Nadine Dorries, but I would imagine not too many of them who will actually go to the Treasury and say, give me less money. And Peter, do you think that voters are in for quite a shock if Liz Truss wins and does what she says she's going to do? I mean, my sense is that this is going to be one of the most radical and, unfortunately for her, very short administrations that we have known for a very, very long time. Or do you think so much of this is actually bluster, and once they get into power, she and her allies will find that, as so often happens, the civil service, the machine, the blob, whatever you want to call it, acts to thwart so many of the more radical things that she would like to do? Yeah, well, it will really depend on how quickly she acts, I think, and the momentum that's behind her, and how much unity there is in the Conservative Party as a result, and in her cabinet as well. Certainly, if she gets an overwhelming result, I predict something like 2/3, possibly more actually, on Monday. It'll be really interesting to see that she has a mandate from the party, but obviously a mandate for the country, for the Conservatives, but not her personally. And also the question in terms of results, because it's quite a big gamble to say we're going to cut taxes and go for growth, unless that growth comes really quickly, and often it doesn't, even with that strategy. It'll be really, really interesting to see whether those results come, whether people feel, and the only question Labour has to ask in 2024 is, do you feel better off under the Conservatives, yes or no? Do you feel more levelled up under the Conservatives, yes or no? You only get the growth if you cut taxes and you cut unnecessary regulation at the same time. And talking of regulations, of course, the other thing that the outgoing Prime Minister saying today about, we've got to do more nuclear,
you know, we could say, well, actually, you know, you have been in power for quite a long time.
Yes.
Why have you left it so late, Boris?
And he's blamed successive governments, as he put it, presumably not including the one that he was foreign secretary in with Theresa May. But no, he said it's not a panacea. Slight sideswipe at Liz Truss there. He really puts a lot of faith in nuclear energy, but certainly saying that it's about time that we got to the stage where we're investing in nuclear energy. But even with Sizewell C, that looks as if it'll go ahead with £700 million of our money put into it, another billion from the French firm EDF. It looks as if that it will take until at least 2030, if not longer, for any energy actually to go into the national grid for that. So it's a nice announcement, but nearly sort of 10 years hence before we actually get anywhere with it.
I mean, I think that there's going to be huge rows within the Conservative Party about this because, you know, she wants to do fracking, but there's large chunks of the party that doesn't. And again, the only way they'll drive it through is at a national level. Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it goes against a lot of the sort of localism idea of many Conservatives like the kind of localism. But the problem is, if you and Boris Johnson at one stage talked about having ballots in local areas about whether it should be fracking. I mean, those will never be passed.
Madness.
Mm.
Or ballots of a street as to whether to have development.
Complete
never going to happen. You've got to take decisions within the interests of the country, and it's part of my kind of long-running thesis that I'm not really sure devolution works. But
for these nationally important planning issues, I have a simple slogan: you have a national planning regime with local compensation, and that's the way you drive it through.
He's getting on his political soapbox.
I'm getting on my high horse.
Get him off.
Peter, thank you so much indeed for sharing those thoughts with us this afternoon. It's going to be only just a few days to go, thankfully. Anyway,
yes, nearly there.
We will see you very soon. That's Peter Cardwell, Talk Radio's political editor. Thank you very much. Keep those calls coming in, 0344 499 1000. Loads of messages. We'll get to those straight after the break. It's Tice Talk. No, it's not. It's Drive Time. I keep saying it.
Oh, wow.
On Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to Drive Time with Isabel and myself. Lots of messages coming in. Really, really sweet one here from Jane, who says, my late husband adored Isabel, so I've turned his photo towards the TV. He said she's the only sensible commentator he had heard. Jane, that's a lovely message. Thank you very much. But I'm going to bring you back down to earth with the message underneath that said, "There's no denying she's the least bad." There we are.
Charming.
Charming.
Means I'm better than you.
Or maybe they meant Liz
no,
Truss.
They meant Liz.
Oh, well, there we are. That was just me bringing you back down to earth.
Thank you.
Anyway, you might like this one, Isabel.
It says Truss might just bring Boris in as Deputy Prime Minister. That's Ash of Hayward in Manchester.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, do you think he would accept the role of Deputy Prime Minister under Liz Truss? I can't see it. I mean, he'd be completely out of control, wouldn't he? That's a problem.
It would be absolute bedlam. Well, let's go to our first call of this segment. We're going to the Isle of Sheppey, where Barry is on the line. Hi, Barry.
Hi, good afternoon to you both.
Hi there.
Hello.
How are you feeling? What's on your mind, Barry?
Well, I'm still recovering from shock what you said about Boris being the deputy leader. So please don't shock me anymore. But basically, what I wanted to say about this national speed limit was what I'm concerned about is obviously the country roads. Just haven't been reviewed and stuff, where the speed limit is left at 70 as it is, where people trek horses and stuff like that.
So the speed limit on the country roads is generally 50, isn't it? Or 60 on the A roads, isn't it? That right,
Yes,
Richard?
that's right, yeah. 70 is only on motorways, isn't it, Barry?
Yeah, but if they increase that, because that's probably the way it will go, that's encouraging people to go even quicker. I mean, they're already treacherous where people obviously take horses for walks and stuff like that.
Take horses for walks, or maybe even ride on them. I mean, you're absolutely right.
That's what I meant. Sorry,
yeah, it was a point I made with one of our earlier callers, that the country roads are much more dangerous. And again, with cyclists, I know cyclists are a hot and divisive subject on this radio station, but, you know, it becomes very dangerous to cycle on country roads if people are swinging round corners at 70 miles an hour.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just another situation where the government are just putting these willy-nilly ideas out there, and they're just not even putting any thought process to them.
Kite flying is what it's called.
It's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
I think you're absolutely right. It's kite flying, Barry. It was responding to a question. In reality, it's probably one of those where they say they've had a review, it takes a lot of civil servants far too long, at far too expense, and then they come up with no change.
Can I let you into a secret, Barry? It's not going to happen. Don't think it's going to happen, but we quite like fantasising that maybe it would, or rather Richard does, because he just likes the idea of speeding along the motorway.
Oh dear, Barry, great call.
I mean, again, also, I mean, if I may say, it's just time wasting. It's just, let's get this country back on track rather than put stuff out there that's just ridiculous.
Please.
It's actually, Barry, do you know, it's a really good point, because all of these other things, it's easy to say them, but actually it then consumes time and resources and energy and effort, and I think all of that at the moment should be focused on one thing: creating growth and getting people through this winter and getting the energy bills down for businesses and for all of us domestically.
We've already wasted enough time on this this campaign trail. It's just absolutely crazy that we're in this situation where people are not being put first, and it's madness. It's just madness.
You're so right, Barry. Well, hopefully some sanity will come back in starting next week. Great call. That was Barry on the Isle of Sheppey, and thanks for that. We're going to head now to, I think it's Aldershot, where Grant is on the line. Hi, Grant.
Hello. How are you both?
Yeah, great.
Good, thank you.
Excellent. I've called in today about the commercial speed limits you mentioned earlier.
Yes, that's right. I hope you're going to put us right, because we were a little bit sketchy.
Yeah, they are a bit different, because I drive a commercial vehicle. The speed limits are 50 miles an hour for a single carriageway, 60 miles an hour for a dual carriageway, 70 miles an hour on the motorway. And that is that. You can't go over them, obviously.
And you do see some vehicles which actually have a sign on the back of them saying things like, you know, this vehicle can only go at, I don't know, 58 miles an hour or something. Is that something that the company has then put on the vehicle to stop their own drivers? Or maybe you could clear that up for me, because I've never really understood that one.
No, that's a restriction for larger size vehicles, 7.5 tonne and over.
Right.
I think 4.6 tonne and over are restricted to 56.
Right.
So regardless of what road, that means they can't go over that speed, and they should have a speed limit that prevents it.
And that's just because those vehicles would get unstable if they rattled along too fast.
Yeah, the size and the weight of and stopping them safely and things like that. I don't drive that large. I drive a van. But if you've got commercial van with sign writing or ladders on the roof or anything like that, and the speed camera van sees you doing 70 on a dual carriageway, you'll get a ticket.
Wow.
Right.
So it's pretty technical. I must ask, Grant, whilst you're on, you quite often see on the sort of the back of a lorry or a van, it says, how am I doing? Am I driving safely? Am I driving at the right speed limit? And then call this number. First of all, does anybody ever call? And then if they do call, does anybody at the other end listen to them?
Somebody will definitely listen. Somebody always listens to them. I've called about other people's driving. I'm luckily not aware of ever having a call about mine. Doesn't mean it hasn't happened, but I don't know about it. It depends on your employer, but I would get told off or complimented. If somebody phoned my employer and said, your driver did well, I would be told, and if they said your driver did badly, I would be told. But I can't speak for, another employer.
You've just given me an idea. I'm going to stick one of those on the back of Richard's car and see if anyone calls in.
This is going from bad to worse. We need to move on.
It's not going to be compliments, is it?
There was two things, if I may. The second thing is, my vote, the next time we get a vote, my vote is only going to someone who is going to do something about all of these stupid 20-mile-an-hour speed limits that are everywhere.
And what would you like to see them back to then, Grant? 25 or back to 30?
Back to 30. 20s outside school, 20s on a run of shops, even 20 on a housing estate makes sense, but not blanket 20s across the whole of a town. It's really difficult to get around.
It is. It's like being on a safari or something. People kind of grinding through at no miles, and you're seeing all these other things whizzing past, the scooters, the bikes, and you're just left at the back.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, and to carry it on is a vote loser.
Grant, noted. Thank you very much indeed. That's Grant in Aldershot. He doesn't like the 20 miles an hour. I think that is too slow in certain areas, but there are obviously schools and areas where it is appropriate. We're going to head quickly before the top of the hour to Skipton, I think, where Steve is. Hi, Steve.
Hi, guys. Just a quick thing here. A gentleman earlier on from some writing motoring magazine talking about the speed limit going up. I'm all in favour of the speed limit going up, and as he said that it's not as simple as pushing the brake to stop. All modern motor cars, it is just as easy as pushing the brake. There's so many driving aids with traction control and ABS and everything like that. You just put your foot in the brake and the car will normally come to a stop straight without skidding off the road or anything like that. So it is as simple as pushing the brake.
Thank you. I'm glad you've cleared that up, because I was feeling a bit stupid, wondering what else I'd been missing out on when I was supposed to be stopping the car. But you're right.
And so, because if you can have what they call the overtaking lane now made into a passing lane, and all the vans that have to do 60 and 70, they can stay in the left-hand lane. And other people that want to do 75, 80 or 90, they can stick in the right-hand lane. As long as people are courteous and allow people behind them to pass, I don't see an issue with it. Modern cars are more than capable of handling anything over up to 140 if they want to, with no problem.
And Steve, you probably say that brakes are a bit more effective, but equally, I suppose, you've got the human response time, and that probably hasn't changed over the years.
Well, then again, there are idiot-proof cars where, again, it is as simple as pushing the brake.
Yes.
All the aids, you don't have to worry about pumping it because you haven't got ABS. As the wheels start to skid, you pump the brake to try and get the car going straight again. You just push the brake, the ABS and the traction control, all the other sensors on that will then do the work for you.
I mean, the technology is extraordinary. In the Tesla that I drive, and I haven't got the full system by any means, but when you put it on cruise control, you literally take your feet off the accelerator, off the brake, and you're coming towards the end of a road up to a roundabout, and it just slows down for you. It is quite remarkable. I have to say, it's a bit weird and a bit eerie. It was quite disconcerting.
Well, the speed limit, it was, as I say, designed in the 60s, not in the 2020s. So I think they should re-look at all the speed limits all the way around. I just think it's a money-making racket, to be honest.
Sure.
These days, modern cars, you put it in this fifth gear, you just about you're idling at 800 RPM. It's doing like 1,200 RPM at 70. You know, they're not designed really to do that speed. They are obviously designed to go a little bit quicker.
Just before we go to the break, Steve, what would you like to see the motorway speed limit changed to then?
Well, as they say, I just think it should be use your discretion.
Use your discretion. So a bit like Germany, it's sort of advisory.
Yeah, why not? You know, as I say, the cars can do it. The technology in the cars is more than capable of handling 99% of problems. You know, if you're not idiot-proof, if a guy wants to pull out in front of you when you're doing that speed, you know, whether you're doing 70 or 170, he's still going to pull out in front of you.
Quite right. Steve, great call. Thank you very much indeed. That's Steve. He would like to increase the speed limits. Maybe he's sort of on my wavelength, but anyway. Keep the calls and messages coming up. We're going to be talking after the break too. Where are we going? We're going to the Centre of Social Justice for talking about the cost of living. It is, of course, drive time.
On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 5.
Good afternoon, I'm Zora Suleiman. Police have released new CCTV footage of the man they believe murdered Olivia Pratt-Corbell. Her killer can be seen fleeing the scene in Liverpool on Monday last week. The masked gunman fatally shot 9-year-old Olivia in the chest after chasing another man into her home. Detectives say they now know 2 guns were used by the suspect, who they describe as toxic to the community.
Now, I know that there will be people shielding him and helping this man avoid being found by the police. If you are found doing this, then we will do everything legitimately possible to bring you to justice. It is beyond comprehension how anyone could protect or harbour a man who's responsible for killing a 9-year-old child.
More rail misery as the RMT union announced 40,000 members who work at Network Rail and 14 train companies will strike this month. They'll walk out on the 15th and 17th of September in a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and working conditions. It's on top of the strikes announced by the ASLEF and TSSA unions this week. Boris Johnson has given the green light to build a nuclear power plant on the Suffolk coast, pledging £700 million towards it. During what is likely to be his final major policy speech as Prime Minister, he said he was confident the Sizewell C project will get over the line in the next few weeks. He's urged his successor to go nuclear, go large.
It will help to fix the energy needs, not just of this generation, but of the next. A baby born this year will be getting energy from Sizewell C long after she retires.
Meanwhile, inspectors from the UN's nuclear watchdog have arrived at the Zaporizhzhia plant in Ukraine. It's after reports of multiple explosions and shelling close to the facility, which caused it to partially shut down. Fighting near the Russian-controlled area has sparked fears of a nuclear disaster. Bill Turnbull's wife has paid tribute to him as being the heart of the family. The former BBC breakfast host has died at the age of 66 after his battle with prostate cancer. In a statement, Sarah McCombie recalled how he made his family laugh every day and said they're immensely proud of him. And this summer was England's joint hottest since records began. According to provisional data from the Met Office, the mean temperature was 17.1 degrees Celsius, the same as in 2018. And now with the latest on the weather, here's Nazanin Gaffer.
Times Puzzles sponsors Talk TV Weather.
Hello, it's the first day of meteorological autumn today, but it's not actually feeling that autumnal out there for today, and that's because we've just about got high pressure in charge, as you can see. But over the next 24 hours or so, we are going to see that jet stream dip its way southwards. That means it's going to allow low pressure systems to come in off the Atlantic with spells of rain and strong winds as we head into the weekend. It's really going to feel quite autumnal then. Before then, though, we continue with mostly fine conditions for the rest of this afternoon. There's a little bit of cloud bubbling up across parts of northern and eastern England, producing the odd light shower or two across these areas, but they are well scattered. Everywhere else looks mostly fine, but as we head towards the latter part of this afternoon and towards this evening, I think we are going to see some heavy showers crop up around central and southern parts of England and Wales, particularly across the southwest. Still feeling fairly fine in any sunshine, though. And then into tonight, showers continuing for a time across central and southern areas. Otherwise, it's mostly dry and clear around northern and eastern parts with a little bit of low cloud. Then tomorrow, it's looking quite wet still with some heavy showers across southern parts of the UK. Further north and west as well, we see a front approaching with spells of heavy rain and rather brisk winds too. And then, as I mentioned, into the weekend, it's going to turn rather wet and windy for many.
Times Puzzles sponsors Talk TV Weather.
I think the topic that I'd like more people to be thinking about is definitely health and social care. You know, we have an outrageous system where we don't look after our elderly in the way we should. We've got to have a proper grown-up and honest conversation about that.
Welcome back, my friends, to Drive Time with Isabel and I this afternoon. It's just gone 5 o'clock. Some great calls coming in there about speeding. Isabel, what about this incredible tweet from Jill?
Yeah, so someone makes a really good point here. Jill makes a really good point. If Boris, she says, if Boris can no longer make decisions to help the public with energy bills and so on, I'm confused as to how he's been able to make a £700 million commitment today to Sizewell, that's the nuclear power station, and 54 million to Ukraine a few weeks ago. And Joe, you're absolutely right. You know, he's spent the past few weeks doing very little indeed, as far as I can tell. Not heard an awful lot of him. In fact, I'm not really sure where he's been. And the excuse is, of course, that he's the outgoing Prime Minister, doesn't want to commit anyone to anything. And then, lo and behold, just before he leaves, a whopping great big new commitment on nuclear power. Bit odd.
It really does seem, I mean, just completely sort of inconsistent, but then I guess that's Boris, isn't it? And, you know, when actually everybody's so concerned about the cost of living, about the energy bills, a complete vacuum of leadership from anyone in the Conservative Party, and yet Boris can just make these £100+ million decisions almost at the sort of the click of a pen. And we really do need to focus on the sort of the fall in disposable income that's been forecast. There's a report out today from the Resolution Foundation that it could fall about 10%, or about £3,000 a year out of everyone's family coffers every year. The biggest squeeze on living standards for a century, Resolution thinks. Well, we're delighted now to be joined by Joe Shallam of the Centre for Social Justice to talk about this and what sort of essentially we think the government may do next week, the new government. Joe, very good afternoon. Thanks for joining Isabel and myself on Drive Time. So, I mean, you've obviously been looking at the CSJ, like everybody else, at the options, making representations. Do you agree with the resolution that it could be that bad, a sort of 10% fall in disposable income, or...?
Well, these are very concerning figures indeed, coming from the Resolution Foundation's analysis there, and they largely align with what we've been looking at the CSJ as well. Today we published a new report which set out our proposal really for the government to help the poorest in society with the cost of living challenge. That's absolutely our focus. And what we've seen in our analysis is that households are facing considerable falls in real income over the autumn period and further into next year as well. So it's absolutely key that the government acts on this as its top priority when the new Prime Minister's in place.
And what are your, very briefly, what are your 2 or 3 key recommendations then for the incoming Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister?
So what we're calling for today is a combined package of a targeted welfare boost for the poorest households. It's really important that we get money to those on the lowest incomes. And the way to do that is to use the existing mechanism that we've got, which is the welfare system. We saw it during the pandemic, getting cash to people very, very rapidly. And so what we'd like to see is, instead of benefits being uprated next year, as they usually are in April, bringing that forward to October and uprating by around 13%.
Wow.
That will see households receive more money proportionally to their needs. And that's a really critical point, because the existing package that the Chancellor set out in May, while very welcome, didn't really do enough to help those families with larger bills. So if you're a couple with children, you're going to pay more. If you're a lone parent, you're going to pay more. And what this targeted welfare boost will do is negate, in large part, that fall in real income that we're now forecasting over the autumn and winter period.
I mean, Joe, I just don't think a Truss administration will do this. I don't know, of course I don't know, but my instinct is that the last thing she's going to want to do is introduce a huge hike for benefits claimants when you've already got an awful lot of people who are working very, very hard on breadline incomes and might then be tempted to actually move into the benefit system and out of work that doesn't pay enough. And there's got to be a tension there, hasn't there?
Well, look, I think we recognise that there is a need here to help people who are above the benefit claiming cohort. Frankly, there's lots of people on middle incomes looking at energy bill sort of forecasts next year and thinking, how on earth am I going to get through? But with this proposal, it's actually a lot more cost effective than some of the other proposals that have been bandied around as sort of furlough-style interventions, which are actually very wasteful in terms of not being very targeted and spending billions on higher earners. So what we're proposing here does sound generous, but is actually around £8.2 billion worth of support that will give the new Prime Minister that additional fiscal headroom, which is basically an economist term for more cash, to help those on higher incomes as well.
But essentially, Joe, this energy crisis, which of course is driving almost everything within the cost of living crisis, if the energy prices remain high for much longer than people think. If it goes on for years, not just a few months, then this is like sticking plaster on a gaping open wound.
Well, I think there's two things that need to happen at once here. There's your emergency response, which is a sticking plaster. You need to put a plaster on a cut. You need to sort it out, but then you need to think long term about treating the infection, if you like, and that means dealing with things like insulation. That means increasing our energy security. Part of the Prime Minister's announcement today was looking at that. But the fact is, I think we need to sort of take this problem as it comes and use the mechanisms that are there for us to get help out quickly, watching and learning as those forecasts emerge and we have more real-time data about what's really going on. Because, there are a lot of forecasts that are jumping around in a very volatile way at the moment. And so to commit to a 12-month to 24-month package, signing away hundreds of billions of pounds in the process seems to me to be not the right approach.
Can I just ask you, what do you think this is going to look like for ordinary working people or people who are dependent on benefits in months to come if the government doesn't do some of the more radical things that you're proposing? Are we going to see, for example, food banks becoming overwhelmed because of the demand? What does this actually look like on the ground?
One of the things that we do at the Centre for Social Justice very regularly, we've got a network of small charities across the UK who we speak to and we visit, and we learn from their insights about exactly what's going on. And already the stories we've been hearing about some of the desperation out there at the moment is immensely troubling. We put out a study early in the year looking at the rise in illegal money lending. So we estimate up to 1 million people could be turning to illegal money lenders as a way of getting by. So I think you're right to say that there are a lot of sort of social consequences to the cost of living crisis that haven't really been fully examined yet and are going to come to the fore this winter unless something's done pretty quickly. I
think that's absolutely right. I mean, I have my own anecdote on this. Just the other day, saw a child gathering stuff in Tesco that he clearly couldn't pay for, and I am quite certain that he had been sent out by his mother or father to shoplift those goods. He looked desperately uncomfortable. I did offer to pay for them for him, but he just was very, very uncomfortable about it all, and he remained lurking, I think, looking for his moment to dart out of the shop. And I think we're going to see an awful lot of that. It was really, really upsetting.
I think, that is harrowing, and I think there is cause for some optimism. There is a labour market which is looking healthy at the moment, and one of the other parts of the package that we're proposing is an effective tax cut for the poorest workers. There's about 1.8 million households who are claiming universal credit but in work, and at the moment, despite lots of progress in recent years, there's still pretty big disincentives to take on more hours, in that you see your benefits withdrawn very quickly when you do that. And so by restoring the work allowance, which was cut by the former Chancellor George Osborne back in 2016, the other key part of our package is actually helping people move into work and take the opportunities that are out there in order to protect themselves against the spiking inflation.
I think that's a really, really good point, actually, Joe, because otherwise the risk is that, lots of people want pay rises up at sort of 10, 11, 12% to meet inflation, but that's just not going to happen in most cases. Let's say you get 5%, but if benefits increase by the rate of inflation, in a sense, you're closing that gap. You're potentially reducing the reducing the opportunity, the incentive to get people back into work, which is the very opposite of what's required.
So I think this is a danger that we have to be alive to, and it is important to have a welfare system. The universal credit system has been built specifically to help people make that journey not only into work, but actually to increase hours and to move further up the sort of career ladder. We can't lose sight of that, and that's exactly what this work allowance effective tax cut policy would do. But at the same time, for those who are unable to work, for those who are struggling on the very lowest incomes, it's really important that we maintain welfare and benefit levels to just even the real income level that we need people to have to survive the coming inflationary storm this autumn and winter.
And actually, Joe, we've just had a message in here from Chris supporting that targeting. Your contributor is quite correct, targeting people on lowest incomes, anybody on a reasonable income, who should not spend a few £1,000s on a holiday. They should pay their bills instead. Not having a holiday is a first world problem, and that obviously will be the decision that millions of families will be making and taking.
Yeah, I think that's right. And the other dimension to this, which is critical, is bills going up by a couple of £1,000s means that £2,000 fewer or £2,000 less cash that people have to spend in the economy. That discretionary spend, whether it's on holidays, but more domestic economic activity, going down the pub, going out to a restaurant. This is going to have an economic ripple, the likes of which it's very hard to sort of imagine at the moment. And so while the priority for us at the moment and the real focus for government, I think, should be protecting the very poorest households, there will need to be measures to support the economy as this crisis unfolds.
Yeah, fantastic. Joe, thank you so much for your thoughts there. That's Joe Shallam, who is the Policy Director at the Centre for Social Justice. I mean, it really is pretty sobering stuff, some of these numbers.
It absolutely is. This £3,000 a year out of family disposable income, I mean, it probably wasn't terribly disposable in the first place. Who's got that margin? Not very many people at all.
That's right. Lots of other messages coming in about that and the targeting. Another one here, actually, which has just come in by tweet, which is saying time to uncouple the national gas price from international prices so that we don't have to pay the very high prices and then announce fracking, as that will quickly drive down gas futures. That's something very dear to my heart.
There's another important point here by Steve, who says, you two know exactly why Boris can announce a nuclear power station. It's because both candidates have agreed to it. Well, I'm not so sure about that, because such a big announcement would normally be part of a much wider energy strategy, and the candidates don't agree on that. So I'm not sure I'm entirely buying that. I think Boris has just got an eye to his legacy.
But a good message. Thanks for that. Keep those messages coming in and the calls 0344 499 1000. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere. It's drive time. It's Talk TV.
Welcome back to Drive with Richard and me. And we've had really interesting conversations about speed limits. We've been talking about the cost of living, as always, and we're very keen to take your calls. Give us a ring on 0344 499 1000. Now, Richard, you and I have been told off, I'm afraid to say. We have been told off by Joanne, who says that we're being very rude looking at tweets while someone is talking, while we've got callers. Joanne, I've got news for you. I'm really good at multitasking. I'm afraid I'm not sure the same can be said for Richard.
Order, that is bang out of order, surely. I mean, are men better at multitasking?
I can definitely look at the tweets and listen to the caller, but I'm not so sure that the same goes for you.
I think actually, though, Joanne, what we're trying to do is to bring in a relevant tweet to a conversation, which, if it adds to the quality of that discussion. But anyway,
just making excuses. So today is technically the first day of autumn, and in our household this is doom for more than one reason, not just because the weather's going, but because the beginning of autumn heralds spider season. Now, this is something I literally dread from the few months when it's finished, because this goes on in our household until I think basically September, October, and then it starts to fizzle out in November. I start dreading it again in about, I don't know, June. The fear sets in, because I'm not talking little spiders here. I am talking giant specimens. I have been capturing them on camera from a very safe distance, I may say. These things absolutely terrify me. Look at that, and just to give you an idea of the scale of it, this is a small one, and it's about 4 inches long. I have physical symptoms when I see these things. My heart starts racing. I'm properly phobic. I'm gulping even looking at it. And I have to essentially call for help. Richard pretends that he's very manly about these things.
I mean, come on. That was, I mean, you could barely see that with a naked eye. That wasn't a spider. That was more like a sort of a mosquito.
Let me just say, he is not picking those things up. So I would love to know, has anyone got any top tips to get me through the spider the spider season even? Now, don't talk to me about cats. I've got 2 of those, not interested. Dog, not interested. Long hoover does work a treat. I don't want to hear anything about glasses and picking it up with a piece of cardboard or something like that. These things are way too big to fit in a glass, let me tell you. You'd need a sort of flower vase to fit it in. So is there any way of, first of all, not having them in the house? And secondly, once they're there, is there some clever way of getting rid of them?
Please do help. If anybody's got any great, bright ideas to solve this, because this really is Spidergate. I mean, you almost get squeals and howls when you see one.
I am actually thinking of moving out the house for the next few weeks. The other thing I wonder is, does anything work in terms of overcoming arachnophobia? Because I recognise I genuinely have a problem. This is a proper fear. And they used to have at London Zoo, they used to run arachnophobia courses. I don't know whether they still do, but it's definitely probably time for me to sign up for one of those. So any top tips, I am all ears, because this does ruin my autumn, which otherwise is my favourite season.
There we are, folks. So please do help Isabel with that. That is very important to overcome Spidergate. We've got Richard on the line. Hi there, Richard in Windsor. How are you doing?
Winslow, Buckinghamshire.
Winslow, there we are.
Yeah.
How are you doing? What have you got any top tips for spiders?
I get a fluffy duster, pick them up and chuck them out the window.
Well, that's what I said, but...
You get a what? A glass?
You know, one of these fluffy dusters.
Oh, those! Oh, but what if it... You see, I would be terrified that it will rush up the duster and onto my arm.
No, they don't. They're so frightened. I mean, you're a million times bigger than a spider. Anyway,
I've heard that nonsense before.
What were you ringing about, Richard?
So I phoned in about roads and accidents and so on.
Right, and what's your perspective on that? Do you think that there needs to be a change or no change at all?
Well, yeah, change. People need to concentrate on what they're doing. So-called accidents occur through negligence, because people are not looking where they're going. Quick look at the road, make sure it's still there, continue chatting to the passenger. This is exacerbated by every movie you ever watch, where you've got a guy or a girl driving And we're looking at the passenger must make lots of eye contact because we're nice people and we want to make eye contact. And subliminally, this goes through to people's driving. So they think they can sit behind the wheel, quick look at the road, carry on. You've only got to get out on the road and watch other drivers. And I speak from experience of being shunted in the back 3 times each time I sued. When I was 18, my left leg was smashed up, and I spent 20 weeks in traction in hospital, and subsequently had to have a resurfaced hip and a new knee, all because somebody wasn't looking where he was going.
You're absolutely right about the movies thing. I mean, I always comment on that when it comes up in a movie, because they are always doing that, aren't they? The couples in the car, and they're kind of talking to each other.
We all know in movies that they're on the back of a trailer. They're not really driving. They're on the back of a trailer with a camera filming them so they can close their eyes, really, because they're not actually driving anywhere. But subliminally, I feel very strongly that this goes through to people thinking that's an acceptable way of driving. I mean, I drive with my eyes in every direction all the time, front, rear, mirrors. I never take my eyes off the road because I don't want my other leg smashed up and I don't want to run somebody over. And Quentin Wilson earlier on, going on about speed, well, we all know that if you hit somebody at 70 miles an hour, going to do more damage than 50 or 30. But if you pay attention, you don't hit them in the first place.
Good point, Richard. Thank you very much indeed for that. There we are. That's Richard's top tips. Meanwhile, lots of suggestions already pouring in for Isabel on the spiders. This is a good one, Isabel.
What was that one? Peppermint oil in water, spray around windows, doors inside and out. Oh, doors inside and out. That they really don't like it, apparently. Peppermint oil. OK. I was just distracted there if I sounded a bit kind of bumbling, because I saw a tweet from somebody saying, give up on the argument about whether men or women are better at multitasking. I think the verdict is I won that one.
Yeah, so Peter, actually, I've got to be... Peter said here... Peter, I think you're wrong. Peter, you know it's a lost cause that you say to Richard. You know full well all women are expert in that dark art. Quickly going to Doreen in Kent, who's got a top tip on spiders. Hi, Doreen, just very quickly.
Hello. I was just phoning up to say I heard that it was conkers or chestnuts.
Oh, that old chestnut. I knew that one was coming. We've tried the chestnuts, made no difference whatsoever. Have you found that it's worked, or...?
No, I haven't myself, because I'm not frightened of spiders, I'm frightened of mice.
Ah, OK, well, we don't have any mice. And funny enough, the cats are quite interested in mice in our household. There are none, but spiders, they really don't care. Thank you so much for that one.
Doreen, great suggestion. Loads of messages coming in. There are humane ultrasonic pest repellers, apparently.
Oh, yeah, I've bought them.
We'll try those again. Anyway, coming up after the news, we're going to be talking to Chris McGovern regarding the COVID inquiry. Stay with us. It's Drive Time. It's Talk TV.
Join me, Ian Collins, every day on Talk TV. There is nothing we hate more than hypocrisy. Discussing the big issues. Why was it so hard to establish the deputy leader was at a meeting with her colleagues? The callers, Alan in Grimsby, Tracy in Burton-on-Trent. Dave, thank you very much. Picking apart the big stuff. This simply does not wash. Look who's back under the spotlight.
This is Talk TV News.
Good afternoon, I'm Zora Suleiman. Police have released new CCTV footage of the man they believe murdered Olivia Pratt-Corbell. Her killer can be seen fleeing the scene in Liverpool on Monday last week. The masked gunman fatally shot 9-year-old Olivia in the chest after chasing another man into her home. Detectives say they now know 2 guns were used by the suspect, who they describe as toxic to the community.
Now, I know that there will be people shielding him and helping this man avoid being found by the police. If you are found doing this, then we will do everything legitimately possible to bring you to justice. It is beyond comprehension how anyone could protect or harbour a man who's responsible for killing a 9-year-old child.
More rail misery as the RMT union announced 40,000 members who work at Network Rail and 14 train companies will strike this month. They'll walk out on the 15th and 17th of September in a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and working conditions. It's on top of the strikes announced by the ASLEF union and the TSSA unions this week. Boris Johnson has given the green light to build a nuclear power plant on the Suffolk coast, pledging £700 million towards it. During what is likely to be his final major policy speech as Prime Minister, he said he was confident the Sizewell C project will get over the line in the next few weeks. He's urged his successor to go nuclear, go large. And this summer was England's joint hottest since records began. According to provisional data from the Met Office, the mean temperature was 17.1 degrees Celsius, the same as in 2018. Well, that's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back, folks. We're just reading some hysterical messages coming in. Lots of top tips about spiders, but actually the one I liked most of all was from Warsash, where Steve said, Richard, you can tell Isabel that men don't need to multitask because we've learnt to prioritise.
Ouch. Yeah, I think we're good at that too, actually. And on the spider tips, thank you for all the suggestions. There are so many of them that I'm actually going to have to go through them all after the show. But somebody says just keep a Hoover handy, and absolutely I do that, to the point that at the end of the day the Hoover comes all the way upstairs and is parked in the bedroom, so that if I notice one in the middle of the night, that Hoover's getting put on and I am suctioning that thing up, and then I put the thing on its end so there's no way, I don't know, could the spider crawl out of the Hoover? That's my fear. So I have to square that off too. So thank you for all the suggestions. The house is going to be a hotbed of anti-spider devices, different sprays. You're probably not going to want to come home, are you?
Spidergate, Hoovergate, who knows where. We also need to talk about the very serious issue of the COVID inquiry, which has sort of started, but not really started. But there is news today that supposedly the second module of the inquiry is about to get going. And this inquiry, I mean, let's remember, a country like Sweden, they've already had their inquiry, done and dusted. There we are, back to the duster. Done and dusted, and report made. We've barely started. This inquiry is going to take about 4 years, and is going to cost around £30 million every year. If they say 4 years, it'll probably be 6 years. But most worryingly of all is that there's almost no reference whatsoever in this bit that's going to look at the decision-making process as to why the decision was made to close schools, and what was the sort of the implication, almost like the cost-benefit, the collateral damage analysis. And we're delighted now to be joined by someone who's been very focused on this issue, Chris McGovern from the Campaign for Real Education. Chris, welcome to Drive Time. You've been so focused on this issue for many years, but I know we're very vocal through the COVID lockdowns about this. How concerned are you that the inquiry is almost sort of deliberately trying to avoid focus on the decision to close schools?
It's a pretty serious matter, isn't it? Because we have had school closures, best part of 2 years on and off. We've had children in poorer parts of the country probably suffering more because they were given less support. And we need to know just what impact this had on children. And we need to be able to compare our performance with other countries overseas. You mentioned Sweden, I think, earlier. Sweden was a country which didn't lock down its schools and didn't lock down its economy, and has done actually better than the UK in terms of fighting COVID. Very, very important that the government give priority to the situation children have found themselves in, and yet they seem to put it in the back burner, almost as though it's too embarrassing. And I noticed that amongst the 8 people who are on the COVID inquiry team, the secretary is actually from the Department for Education. So in a sense, he's inspecting himself anyway. So very worrying. But I would never like to see COVID used as an excuse for underperformance, because our children need to do better, and we can't just blame COVID for underperformance.
I mean, one of the difficulties, Chris, I imagine, is how do we assess in the short term what the impact has been on the education of children, either qualitatively or quantitatively, because the ramifications of their 2 years of totally disrupted education may well not be fully felt for many, many years, or seen for many, many years. But I guess the point is that you've got to make a start now in assessing that.
You're absolutely right. It takes a very long time for educational change, or in this case, the changes brought about by COVID, to have an impact, and we'll see the impact. I mean, we're seeing the examination results at the moment, and they've gone up, of course. So contrary to all expectations, although they're slightly down last year, they're actually up in 2019. That tells you the sort of confidence you can have or cannot have in the education establishment. You know what's going to happen next year or so? We're going to have the next round of PISA results. PISA are international tests, and we can compare our performance with other countries. And, you know, there's been a lot of talk about the southeast and London outperforming other parts of the country in GCSE and A-level. And that's a gulf. But the real gulf is not between London and Newcastle. It's between London and Shanghai. And the gulf about 3 years. We're about 3 years behind in London compared to Shanghai. The children of street cleaners in Shanghai are outperforming the average best schools in London. That's the truth of it. That'll come through when we see the PISA tests.
I mean, that'll be fascinating, whether there's any link between the countries that didn't lock down and the performance of young people, children at schools, their exams, you know, their overall sort of reading and writing abilities, and overall development at very young ages.
I mean, I'm sorry to cut in there, but I would just suggest that perhaps the most powerful thing the COVID inquiry could do in relation to the impact on children is just to take a sample of a couple of hundred parents and ask for their stories about how the pandemic, lockdown and the closure of schools affected their children. And that would be a cheap and easy way to get some really, really strong evidence. I know from my own family the impact it had on my children. They're very lucky, my children. They've got all the privileges anyone could hope for. I think we would get some shocking qualitative evidence that way.
Yeah, look, that's true. But the problem there, since I retired as a head teacher, I've been taught for 35 years, I've been working with underprivileged children and families. And what I found is that the parents of children who suffered under COVID, many of those parents themselves are badly educated. They're illiterate and they're ignorant. They're not going to come on any television shows and say, I can't read and write. They couldn't even help their children.
Yes.
Now, we're in a situation here where there are many parents who suffered themselves under the education system years ago. They couldn't help their own children, whereas other parents, of course, could. Therefore, it depends a lot on which parents you talk to. You talk to the parents, and I took over a failing school, took it out of special measures and so forth. But the problems we had with children, I mean, all kids are the same. They all have light in their eyes. They want to succeed. They need good teaching. That's what they need most of all. And we've got to get away from the idea of excuses. But you're right, we do need to sample parents. But I tell you what, it's going to be difficult to sample the really underprivileged, because they're not going to want to talk about their inability to read and write, because they're victims of the system.
And I think you make a really important point there, that what happened during the pandemic is only going to have widened the gap between the children of the privileged and educated and those at the absolute least privileged, most disadvantaged end.
Yeah, that's the sad truth of it. But as I say, I would not want to use this as an excuse. There's no reason why children in the north of England or the Midlands shouldn't do as well as the children in London. The main reason why children in London do so well is because over half of the children have an immigrant parent. Immigrants work hard. They're a credit to our country. There's a lot of talk about immigration and the downside, but the immigration story with regard to children in schools is a success story. And where you have lots of immigrants, you have higher standards. Why do you have higher standards? Because they work very hard. We've got to work out why it is that, you know, the white working class in Britain are failing so badly. There's a big job for this committee of inquiry, isn't there?
There is indeed. Chris, the other point coming out of lockdowns was obviously there was the commissioner for essentially sort of the recovery programme, who recommended to invest, I think it was about 15 billion. The government only committed about a tenth of that. What are you hearing in terms of that process? Is the money getting into the schools that need it? It's almost certainly not enough. Is any getting to where it's most needed?
obviously, with the electricity, the power situation, schools aren't going to need more money this year or next year. But let me just explode the myth. Look, I'm the heretic in education. Let me tell you a home truth. You're not going to hear it anywhere else. Between 1953 and 2010, this country, the United Kingdom, increased its expenditure on education in real terms by 900%. 900% in real terms between 53 and 2010. Yes, it's gone back a bit since then. Did it lead to an improvement? No, it didn't. There are countries around the world that spend a tiny amount of money in education. 10% of what we spend do far better. So, yes, we do need more money in schools at the moment. But look, the problem is not about money. It's about how you teach the children. The majority of staff in school are not teachers, which is remarkable.
Quality, not quantity, it sounds like. Chris, thank you so much for your thoughts there. That's Chris McGovern, the chairman of the Campaign for Real Education, with us, sharing his thoughts. Well, stay with us. We're going to be taking your calls, your views, and just the deluge of top tips on Spidergate. Stay with us. It's Drive Time. It is Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to Drive Time here on Talk TV. Lots and lots of top tips coming in on spiders. What's this one about the glass and the...
The glass and card method. Listen, to anyone who's suggesting that I pick up a gigantic house spider with a glass and a piece of card, may I just remind you that these things have a leg span that are bigger than the top of the glass. I can do that with the little ones. I can be quite brave with the ones that are only the size of, I don't know, a couple of fingernails put together.
No,
but when you're talking about the tarantula-sized ones, a glass and a card is not going to cut it. And by the way, they're really good at, like, creeping underneath the card.
I think you're getting the gist that this is a cause of great anxiety. Let's get
really not much help laughing, are you? I mean...
I just like to...
Ladies, this is not going well.
We're going to head up to Sheffield, where Jason is on the line. Hi, Jason.
Hello there, Richard. Hello, Isabel.
Hi. Have you got some top tips on Spidergate or something else?
Honestly, it's all I'm interested in.
I can talk about whatever you like, but I've got a top tip for spiders just to start off with.
Okay.
Which is if you buy a
We've just lost you at the crucial moment there, Jason.
Yeah, what do I have to buy? He's going to buy it. What do I have to buy?
Weller Shockwaves hairspray Ultra. You spray them and it freezes them, and you can get rid of them quite easily and they won't crawl about.
Now listen, I'm loving this because Mr. Tice is very big on hairspray. We've got plenty of hairspray in the house, so I think this is an experiment that's going to happen, and we will report back.
So you're saying you freeze it?
It sounds a bit cruel, I have to say. Don't you think?
We've lost Jason. I think we've lost Jason with his top tip of the hairspray on the spiders. Is anyone else? That seems a new one. But anyway, we lost Jason at the crucial moment from Sheffield. We're going to head down to Essex, where Bob's on the line. Hi, Bob.
Hello, Richard. Tell Isabel to get a chameleon.
A chameleon, really? Yeah. And now I'm perking up because this is original. This is a... So what? But I'd need a lot of them, I think. They'd be running through the house.
Two should suffice.
And what, just let them loose in the house?
Well,
or
why not? Why not? The spiders are loose.
How do you feel about that, Richard?
Not so sure about
He doesn't like any lizardy things, so we may have a battle of the fears here.
Well, I actually phoned up regarding our nuclear problem.
Oh, that's much more important.
No, it's not.
I think so, because I'm living right next door nearly to Bradwell Fire Station, which has got the AOK to go ahead. They're going to be doing soil samples and California bearing ratio tests on the soil there, so they make it sure it's stable enough for them to build on it.
Right.
But it is the site of an existing Magnox unit, so it should be a done deal. You know, you're not putting something completely different up there, so I don't see why the planning takes such a damn long time.
Well, that's a really good point, Bob. Sorry to interrupt. Out of interest, was there any compensation when Magnox was first built there?
In what regard?
For local residents, because this is part of the thing for me, that if we want quick planning decisions, there has to be some form of local compensation scheme that sort of people automatically qualify for.
Well, not so much a compensation scheme. I think what they do have is a lot of consultation, not compensation, a lot of consultations going on.
Yes, and this goes on for years, doesn't it? I mean, it's interesting to in my capacity as international editor at Talk TV, I have looked at how quickly other countries manage to build nuclear power stations. Yes. And do you know which country holds the record?
Well, I would say possibly France. They got 75% nuclear. We've only got 16.6%. Theirs was done by not Jacques Clouseau.
Chirac.
I forgot his name.
Chirac.
Was it Chirac?
Well done, Richard. Yes, that's the chap. They got 75%, for God's sake. Their power rate went up by 4% this year. Ours is going up to, 54% plus?
Yeah, so I can tell you that actually the quickest so far has been achieved in the United Arab Emirates, where they managed to get the best part of a nuclear power station up within 4 years. Now, I don't think the whole thing is up and running yet. I mean, 10 years is much more normal time span, but even if they are somewhere above 4 years and well less than 10, they will have been doing fantastically. I think Japan is also quite quick, but they, of course, have a very sort of divided relationship with nuclear power, having had disasters there. And I think when I last looked at this for Talk, about half of their nuclear power stations were mothballed amid fears of potential sort of impact of tsunamis and so on. So,
well, their problem is that they're built on the Fukushima one was built on a junction of about 3 tectonic plate movements.
That's it. Yeah, exactly.
So really, it was a bit stupid idea to kick off with.
Yes,
But
indeed.
It's a water-powered one, isn't it? It's a water-cooled one. So the only thing that exploded was the actual water coolant tower that was just built up a head of steam and just blew its lid.
But
the one at Bradwell, the two reactors at Bradwell, are going to be on a similar kind of basis. It's right next door to the water anyway, so it's a piece of cake for cooling. And since water level rises are going to increase by about 250 mil by the time the Greenland ice sheet melts.
But in summary, Bob, your view is you've got to accelerate the consultation and get on with them.
Absolutely right, Richard, because 9 times out of 10 it's on an existing site that's been used for nuclear power, so what's the problem?
Exactly. Bob, great call. Thank you very much for that from Essex. We're going to head from Essex west to Cheshire, where Amanda is on the line. Hi, Amanda.
Hello, Richard. What it is, I want to speak to Isabel. I absolutely understand about the spider thing.
Thank you for that, because I'm serious. This is not just a joke here. I'm actually really, really affected by it. I don't want to be like this. You know, I'm a pretty tough lady.
Isabel, thank you so much. And I'm a normal human being. I've got a job. I have 2 kids. But the spider thing, Isabel, it just absolutely, I think it's ruined my life. And I'll tell you a story really quick, Isabel, because I know you're really busy. One day there was a spider. I lived in flats. There was a spider connected to the ceiling. Yeah. And it was massive. Oh, God. Right? And I could not walk past the front door. No, I couldn't. No. And my kids left. No, I'm going to probably get reported now. But I could not take my children to school because it was there. Yeah. And then when I tell people about it, go, pull yourself together. Yeah. And Isabel, I don't mind mice or I know, I don't mind mice or snakes or anything. Wasps I can deal with, but there's something about them I just do not like, Isabel, and I really agree with you and I feel your pain, Isabel.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a physical reaction. I mean, if one of these giant ones is in my bedroom, there is no way I'm staying in that room. You know, I'm not making this up. I have thought about, do I need to have a different house? You know, like a nice modern thing.
Isabel, I'm so with you. And just a really quick one I'm going to tell you about. There was a spider in my bath the other day, and apparently it's called a wolf spider.
We call them wolf spiders, yeah.
Yes, it's a wolf spider, and I know everyone's going to, the PC lot are going to kill me for this. I tried to kill it, I tried to do anything, and it fought back.
Oh my God.
Oh gosh. Look, listen.
No, that's enough, Amanda.
It's too much.
I know. When I was putting the plug on it, the legs were coming through.
Oh, don't. Okay, you've got to stop now.
I think too much information.
On.
But I have got, Amanda, I have got a top tip for both of you from Rob, who says, as a fellow card-carrying arachnophobe, always have the long Hoover at ready. But this is interesting. Spray house polish in the ceiling corners. It'll dry, and then they can't make webs.
This is going to
Spray
be
around the door frames and outside too. They won't come in. Keep sweeping away all the year round. They'll soon find somewhere else. That sounds interesting.
It's going to be a hell of an operation. Are you volunteering?
No, I'm not.
Oh, you're useless, honestly.
Oh dear. Well, keep those messages coming in about other top tips. Now, what's this? Booger salt? Have I pronounced that rightly? Booger salt is another top tip.
Oh, no, bug salt.
Bug salt. Sorry, I couldn't read it. There we are. That's the eyesight going wrong.
I think.
Bug salt. There we are. Now we're going from Cheshire with another top spider tip to Birmingham, where Nigel is on the line. Hi, Nigel.
Hi, Richard and Isabel. Enjoying the show. Yeah, I don't like spiders either. And when I first moved into my house, they were massive and used to scare the living daylight. What I do now is in several rooms, I've got my Pringles tubes from when I finished them. Right. And I've just got one in each room. Okay. And then what happens, if there's a spider in that room, I'll just basically knock it and it goes into the tube and it can't get out, and then I'll just cover the tube and put it outside.
Right, OK. Well, there's a couple of flaws with this plan. The ones in my house are actually bigger than the span of the top of the Pringles thing. That's how bad this problem is.
Yeah,
because I think...
So are mine. Yeah, so are mine. But what happens is...
They crouch and they kind of hunch, don't they?
It falls off the ceiling or it falls off the wall and then it falls into the tube.
Right, OK. I can see myself armed with the tubes.
I don't try and cover it. I just tip it slightly so it will fall off and it falls into the tube.
And it's shiny in there so they can't climb out.
Yeah, exactly.
It feels high risk to me because the tubes aren't very long. Now, if you could find me treble length Pringle tubes, I might risk it.
Well, I've got several. I'll buy they're about 30 centimetres.
Okay.
The really long ones. I don't use the tiny ones.
No, gosh, no, not doing that. Well, listen, thank you for that tip. I'm going to be armed with the Pringles. Seems like a good excuse for a feast of Pringles later.
Fantastic, Nigel. Thank you very much for that top tip. That was Nigel in Birmingham with his top tip. Message in here says, Isabel, I want to know about Richard's bad domestic habits. My vote reform vote hangs on it.
Oh,
maybe
my
not.
Lord.
Maybe not. There we go.
My.
Coming up after the break, we're going to be talking about trials, retrials, and Ryan Giggs. That extraordinary story as to they haven't reached a verdict, or whether or not there might even be a retrial. Stay with us, don't go anywhere. You've been listening with Isabel and Richard to Drive Time here at the home of common sense. It is, of course, Talk TV.
On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 6.
Good evening, I'm Zora Suleiman. Police have released new CCTV footage of the man they believe murdered Olivia Pratt-Corbell. Her killer can be seen fleeing the scene in Liverpool on Monday last week. The masked gunman fatally shot 9-year-old Olivia in the chest after chasing another man into her home. Detectives say they now know 2 guns were used by the suspect, who they described as toxic to the community.
Now, I know that there will be people shielding him and helping this man avoid being found by the police. If you are found doing this, then we will do everything legitimately possible to bring you to justice. It is beyond comprehension how anyone could protect or harbour a man who's responsible for killing a 9-year-old child.
More rail misery as the RMT union announced 40,000 members who work at Network Rail and 14 train companies will strike this month. They'll walk out on the 15th and 17th of September in a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and working conditions. It's on top of the strikes announced by the ASLEF and TSSA unions this week. Boris Johnson has given the green light to build a nuclear power plant on the Suffolk coast, pledging £700 million towards it during what is likely to be his final major policy speech as Prime Minister. He said that he is confident the Sizewell C project will get over the line in the next few weeks. He's urged his successor to go nuclear, go large.
It will help to fix the energy needs, not just of this generation, but of the next. A baby born this year will be getting energy from Sizewell C long, long after she retires.
Meanwhile, inspectors from the UN's nuclear watchdog have arrived in the Zaporizhzhia plant in Ukraine. It's after reports of multiple explosions and shelling close to the facility, which caused it to partially shut down. Fighting near the Russian-controlled area has sparked fears of a nuclear disaster. And this summer was England's joint hottest since records began. According to provisional data from the Met Office, the mean temperature was 17.1 degrees Celsius, the same as in 2018. Well, those are the latest news headlines. Still to come, your TalkSport update. But first, your weather with Nazanin Gaffer.
Times Food and Drink sponsors Talk TV weather.
Hello. So today was the first day of meteorological autumn. It didn't really feel that autumnal. It was mostly due to the fact that we had high pressure just about in charge, but we now lose its influence as we head towards the rest of the week, and that's because the jet stream is moving its way southwards, allowing for low pressure systems coming off the Atlantic, bringing wet and windy conditions into the weekend especially. Until then, fairly quiet for tonight, the last of the cool nights for the week, but there will be some heavy showers around, particularly around central and southern parts of England and Wales. And by dawn, we will see a front approach northwestern parts of the UK, bringing cloudy skies and spells of rain there. It will be a fine start, though, for eastern areas for tomorrow, but I think we will see the continuation of some showers around central and southern parts of England and Wales, maybe some showers for northern England, and it becomes increasingly wet and windy across the northwest. So east will be best for the driest and brightest conditions. And finally, a photographer found himself at the right place at the right time in Mount Rainier, Washington. Footage captured by Matthew Nichols shows the cave beaming with colours of the rainbow as sunlight refracted through the ice crystals and algae on top of the snow. He said the light show lasted for about 2 hours and then the vibrancy diminished as the day progressed.
Times Food and Drink sponsors Talk TV weather.
Hello again. Well, with just hours to go until the transfer window closes, Manchester United have completing the signing of Brazil winger Antony from Ajax for an initial fee of £82.1 million. A deal was already in place between the two clubs, with United agreeing to a potential £4.3 million in add-ons, making Antony the fourth most expensive signing in Premier League history. And in other big moves, Chelsea have agreed a deal with Barcelona for Aubameyang for £10 million, with Marcos Alonso heading to the Nou Camp. While Leicester have made their first outfield signing of the window, bringing in Belgium international defender Wout Faes for a reported £15 million. He signed a 5-year deal. And Fernando Alonso has apologised to Lewis Hamilton after the pair clashed on track at the Belgium Grand Prix. The Spaniard admitted he was wrong in calling Hamilton an idiot and questioning his driving skills. Hamilton said he had not spoken to Alonso but insisted he had already dismissed the row. Well, that's all for now. I'll be back with more in half an hour.
I'm Tom Newton-Dunn, and this is Talk TV. The conversation starts here. If I had to describe Boris Johnson with 3 words, keeps us busy.
Welcome back, folks, to the third and final hour of Drive Time with Isabel and myself. And then, of course, it's the news desk with Kate McCann, and then Jeremy Kyle and Uncensored at 8 o'clock before the talk. And then at 10 o'clock this evening, it's Andre Walker, who will be taking you through the next hour. Now, of course, lots and lots of tips about Spidergate, but someone, yes, it's Chrissy, could not resist it. Tice man, I've got a serious fear of spiders, but my top tip is to play Meghan Markle podcasts on full volume. We still get spiders, but I'm so numb they're a lot less scary.
I think we might be leaving the house as well if we had that on.
Anyway, to much more important issues. So, the Ryan Giggs trial essentially collapsed without reaching a verdict, and the jury was discharged this week. But already there's talk about there being a retrial, which has really sort of troubled us, hasn't it?
So, look, I might be wrong about this, but I sort of feel that if everybody has been through the process, which we all know takes a very, very long time, you know, it will have taken a long time to get to court, the case, and then the defendant and the alleged victim have to go through the really traumatic experience of giving evidence in court, and then a jury deliberates for a very long period and they cannot reach a verdict. To me, that should be the end of the matter. After all, if they can't reach a verdict, then it seems almost by definition that the defendant is not guilty beyond reasonable doubt, because many of them have doubted it, therefore there is no verdict. So my instinct on this is it's rather unfair, to say the least, that a defendant should have to go through this whole process again with another jury, and is that a good use of public money? On the other hand, if you talk to lawyers about this, they will say, look, this is the system we've always had, and to get a verdict, you can't have a split jury, you can't have sort of 7 + 4, you have to have a minimum of 10 agreeing, and then you could have 2 in a minority verdict. So I'm interested what you think. Is it fair to have retrials under circumstances where a jury simply couldn't agree? I mean, I can completely see the case if some dramatic new evidence has come to light, or some kind of abuse of the process comes to light. But if a jury can't reach a verdict, shouldn't that by default mean that that's it? Well, let's ask John Cooper QC, who is a leading human rights lawyer and criminal lawyer. Very good evening to you, John. Thanks for joining Drive Time here on Talk. So what are your thoughts on this, almost sort of the principle of it, leaving aside the sort of the specifics and the detail of this individual case?
Can I make it very clear at the start? I'm sure we all want to make it clear that what we're discussing has absolutely nothing to do with the Ryan Giggs case.
Indeed.
That's a matter which has to take its course, and nothing that I'm about to say or discuss, I'm sure we'll all agree with this, is meant to in any way prejudice that case. So I'm going to talk in generalities here. And the general law on this sort of thing is when I say the general law, it's a matter more or less of practice and procedure. There's not an actual law that says this happens. But practice and procedure and custom and what is done in the law is that it is in with the entire prosecution's discretion as to whether they have a retrial as a result of a jury not coming to any conclusion. And the normal practice is that it's expected the prosecution will always go for a second retrial. If, of course, in the second retrial, there is still no resolution, and that sometimes happens, I've had it in cases I've dealt with as well, then it is rare for there to be a third or fourth trial. But in terms of the generality of it, it is perfectly normal and usually expected that if the jury cannot resolve an issue on the first trial, there be a second retrial. And it is entirely for the prosecution to make that decision.
Thank you for that. It's useful to understand the background to this and why the decision will have been taken. And as you say, we're talking in the generality here, not about the particular case. So asking you generally, whether or not that's the accepted system, do you think it's fair and right for either defendant or the alleged victim in cases to have to go through it all again?
The general principle is that it's highly desirable, if possible, to have resolution one way or the other to an issue, with whatever that resolution is. I'm not a Scottish lawyer, and others may correct me on this as to whether it's still law in Scotland, but in Scotland they used to have a third verdict. It was guilty, not guilty, or not proven.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, I've always been of the view generally that a not proven verdict isn't really adequate. A person is entitled to a resolution one way or the other. And I suppose in many respects the English system tries to achieve the same thing in many respects, to get away from not proven, to have a resolution, either a resolution for any generalised defendant or a resolution for any generalised complainant. And that, I think, is what the law, certainly in England and Wales, strives for, that degree of certainty, that degree of resolution. And that's the motive of it. But Isabel, I quite understand what you say about perhaps a belief that money is spent and generally in cases and must be a time to move on. And the law recognises that, but perhaps doesn't recognise it generally second time round.
And John, what sort of percentage of cases does this come up? Is it 20%, 30%?
Well, it's hard to put a percentage on it. It's a relatively low percentage, but sometimes jurors just simply cannot decide what to do. Sometimes events happen within trials which are absolutely nothing at all to do with the jury, which means that the trial has to be aborted. Say, for instance, someone falls sick, a defendant may fall sick, or something may happen to abort the trial, whereby the trial will be started again. So it's a small percentage, but it's a significant percentage to ensure that there's some finality and conclusion to the proceedings.
Isn't there a danger when there's a retrial that the media coverage of the initial trial and subsequent commentary when that trial collapses prejudices any retrial?
Well, that's why, of course, we're being very careful in this discussion to make sure that doesn't happen in any particular case that may be on people's minds. But that is always a risk, and it is highly desirable, but I suppose unreasonable to expect that in any case of any notoriety, be it a notorious murder allegation or a notorious drugs allegation, people will have read about it and be potentially prejudiced by it. I remember doing a case of my own practice many, many years ago involving, you two may remember it, the Leah Betts case, when that poor girl took an overdose of ecstasy. And I represented the individual accused of giving her that. He was acquitted, so I must emphasise that in the end. But one of the problems there was the picture of this poor girl appeared on the newspapers as she was lying in a hospital bed.
Remember it very well.
All the images. And one of the issues we raised in that trial was whether any potential jury might be prejudiced by what they learned before the trial started. And there is always that risk, and that's why we have to take great care indeed in any ongoing case to make sure that there is no prejudice and everyone's a fair hearing.
Thank you for that. While we've got you on, I must ask you about the backlog in the courts, a lot of which dates sort of throwback from the pandemic. I mean, what are you observing of that, and how long is it going to take to wade our way through it?
Well, it's already biting, I might say. I won't, unless you invite me, go into the issues surrounding the strike. These are issues that have been bubbling along for many, many years. I know when I ran to be chair of the Criminal Bar Association myself back in 2012, I was saying that potentially the bar should be considering the ultimate action of strike action. But already it's having effect. Trials, for instance, are anticipating whether barristers are going to be available after the 5th of September, when the strike begins. And already trials are being halted, even now, if they risk going past the 5th of September mark. It's going to be, and I hesitate to use graphic words, but in my view, potentially it's going to be carnage. But unfortunately, the criminal justice system is collapsing and failing. And
like so much else in this country, I'm afraid to say.
You said it. And this is a very last resort as far as the barristers are concerned. And it is very interesting indeed, and very telling indeed, that the Times editorial only very, very recently came out in significant support of the strike, saying that it was protecting the criminal justice system. So I think right-minded people will see the merits of it and see that if people like barristers, some of the junior barristers on about 12 grand a year.
Completely absurd.
That's the reality of it.
That's the reality, John.
Something in it.
Like so many parts of the system at the moment, it is broken, it is not working, and it needs fixing. That was John Cooper, QC, leading human rights and criminal lawyer. John, thank you so much for those thoughts there on retrials and the state of the number, the charges and the huge queues in the system. We've just got time to go to Betty in Lancashire before the break. Hi, Betty.
Hello, Richard. Hello, Isabel.
Hi there.
Hi, Isabel, this is a little tip for you. My mother, late mother, she used to, when a spider was about, she used to get a jam jar, take the lid off, trap it in the jam jar, put the lid on, and then throw the spider out the door.
And you know what? I knew the jam jar thing was going to come up time again. They're too big to fit in. That's the problem. I'll use them for the tiddlers, but I'm talking giants here.
Oh, well, I've not confronted one of them. Were you talking about tarantulas and the like?
Well, obviously not here in the UK, fortunately. But yes, the ones I'm talking about are very, very big, too big to go in a jam jar, unfortunately. But I will use your trick for the little ones. Thank you.
You know that people actually have tarantulas. Are you still there?
Pet them, pet tarantulas. I mean, there's no accounting for taste, is there? That is just bonkers. Absolutely bonkers.
And just another point about the Ryan Giggs trial. Why are they giving the airtime and the press time? I mean, at the end of the day, it's just another football story that people don't. But there's more important things going on.
I think because the allegations are pretty serious, but we're not going to get into the specifics of that trial. But listen, thank you very much for the spider tips. I've got so many.
You've got loads to go through. Yeah, bit of bedtime reading. Betty, thank you very much indeed. Keep those calls coming in. 0344 499 1000. We'll take your calls and messages after the break. Stay with us. It's Drive Time. It's Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to Drive Time with Isabel and I. Fascinating chat there with John Cooper QC about the retrials and when they happen and when they don't happen. Just before we talk about a extraordinary article on the front page of the Times, decline of the traditional family was revealed in a big new report today. We've just got time to go to Steve in Edinburgh. Hi, Steve.
Hello, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Great. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm currently driving home right across the length of Britain just now, and I keep hearing the news stories just now, and I think I'm getting myself more and more wound up as the news gets repeated every half hour.
That happens to us every day.
It just seems to be continuous at the moment, and I think the story just now with the whole announcement around Sizewell, I think is endemic of a sort of much longer problem that's existed with the existing government just now, and it's all to do with the type of information that's been given and the way that projects like this are being used as bait, essentially, to try and cover up maybe bigger issues in the world.
So just to be clear, are you pro or anti more nuclear power stations? I have to say, by the way, that I grew up just next to Torness Power Station, which you may or may not be familiar with, but on the east coast of Scotland.
Yeah, very much so. I'm very pro-nuclear. I mean, it is the long-term solution to our energy issues, but that's also part of the issue in itself. On one hand, you have the government saying that, you know, we need energy stability, and nuclear is obviously the way to go, but these projects, these large power stations and power station upgrades are all, they're nothing to do with UK industry. It's EDF that 80% owns these operations, and 20% run by the Chinese nuclear power group.
Steve, you're so right. I mean, it takes a long time to design and to get the planning and to build these nuclear power stations, and we were one of the founding sort of industries. I mean, we almost invented, we certainly developed some of the earliest nuclear power stations, had great skills and expertise, and then we let it go.
Exactly. It's the issue that keeps coming up again and again here is planning. Planning keeps holding these things up, and planning is not the issue. This project is something that was earmarked back in 2010. It was green-lit over a decade ago. The issue has been the finance that needs to come from both EDF and the CGN, the Chinese organisation that's running this as well. It's nothing to do with planning.
Well, but that all takes leadership and political will, doesn't it, Steve? I mean, I'm not happy at all about having Chinese finance or designers or operators anywhere near our nuclear power stations. I think that would be strategically foolish.
I completely agree, but that harks back to the other issue that we have, that we're telling China to get out of our telecoms networks, but we're happy to have them in our power stations. It's very, very hypocritical.
It's very hypocritical, Steve, and I think it's very foolish. Great call, though, Steve. Thank you very much for your thoughts there. I hope you have a safe trip home with a little less frustration. Fascinating there. Isabel, this story on the decline of the UK family, the percentage of children that are now essentially growing up outside the traditional nuclear family. It really struck you this morning, didn't it?
It did, yeah. So this is a report that nearly half of British children now grow up outside the traditional two-parent household, which puts us at the top or the bottom, depending how you like to see it, of a kind of European league table on this. So 44% of those born in 2000 will have spent some of their childhood up to age 17 outside a traditional nuclear family. And I think this is fascinating because it shows how profoundly our society is changing and raises all sorts of questions. I mean, fundamentally, instinctively, I do think children are better off brought up by mum and dad in as stable environment as possible. I was lucky enough to have that as a child. Mum and dad were very solid and we had no instability in that sense. But the reality is that not everybody with the best will in the world can achieve that. You know, I failed on that front myself. I am a single parent. I've got 3 children, and do my very, very best to give the children as stable and brilliant an upbringing as I can, effectively without their dad in the same home. And I think that this will touch a lot of people, this issue and this debate. You know, can single parents be almost as good as 2 parents? If you grew up in a single parent household, did you feel disadvantaged? Is it better than 2 warring parents? Or were you actually quite relieved when your parents broke up? So I imagine that everybody has a story to tell on this in one way or another. And, you know, I say instinctively, I feel that it is best if you can have 2 parents in the home, but that is not the reality of much of our family makeup today. So I'd be very interested to hear your experiences and your hopefully non-judgmental thoughts on that.
And a couple of really interesting sort of features came out. One was that families of Asian descent, Chinese, Indian, Bangladeshi or Pakistani, much more likely to remain headed up by a married couple. 22% of white British families in lone parent household. But the report does say, sort of highlights, it's about the quality of family relationships rather than the composition or relative position of the family in society, about strong, lasting relationships, spending time together. This is by Dame Rachel de Souza, the Children's Commissioner for England, and, you know, she's very strong on this sort of stuff.
And I think there's a lot you can do to offset, you know, I don't think it's right to talk about broken homes anymore. You know, for example, if parents have split up, super important that the children still have really strong role models. So, for example, if dad isn't around, you know, have you got uncles that can be a strong role model for them? Have you got cousins? How about the role of the wider family, gran and granddad, anyone else who can anchor those children, make them feel secure? What you don't want, I would argue, is a shifting cast of characters coming in and out of the family home, not staying for very long, relationships continually changing. I think that's very, very destabilising for children. What they really need is as much continuity as possible, but that doesn't have to be provided by a mum and dad. That may be optimal, but perhaps you've got 2 mums even, let's be controversial here, or 2 dads, and they're providing that stability. As long as children have the right role models and are really anchored there. That's my personal view. You may well disagree with it. I'm sure you will have your own experiences brought to bear there.
And what was interesting also was there was a reference to the effect of the pandemic on families and the amount of time that actually fathers spent on childcare, and that doubled during lockdown.
Which is a fantastic thing, although I suspect a lot of them are being gratefully rushing back to work afterwards.
Interested in your thoughts and messages on that. You know the number 0344 499 1000, or send us a tweet to @TalkTV. Coming up after the news, the other big issue, not really getting much airtime at all, is care homes. What's going on in care homes? And it turns out there are still really severe restrictions in many, many care homes. We'll be talking to a lady who's been suffering. She's the daughter of a care home resident. I think people will be pretty surprised and shocked at what's going on. And this has such massive, massive knock-on consequences for hospitals and the ambulance waiting time. Don't go anywhere. Stay with us. You're listening to Isabel and I here with Drive Time on Talk TV.
I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is Talk TV. I think my most memorable and proudest moment in journalism over all these years is actually being on air during the lockdowns, even when I had COVID myself. Over the last 2 years, getting people to tell their stories, not just about people who lost loved ones to COVID, but people who lost their fundamental freedoms, their children's schooling, their mental health, their physical health, their businesses, and giving people the chance to tell their stories about how it affected them.
This is Talk TV News.
Good evening, I'm Zora Suleiman. Police have released new CCTV footage of the man they believe murdered Olivia Pratt-Corbell. A killer can be seen fleeing the scene in Liverpool on Monday last week. The masked gunman fatally shot 9-year-old Olivia in the chest after chasing another man into her home. Detectives say they now know 2 guns were used by the suspect, who they described as toxic to the community.
Now, I know that there will be people shielding him and helping this man avoid being found by the police. If you are found doing this, then we will do everything legitimately possible to bring you to justice. It is beyond comprehension how anyone could protect or harbour a man who's responsible for killing a 9-year-old child.
More rail misery as the RMT union announced 40,000 members will strike this month. Workers from Network Rail and 14 train companies will walk out on the 15th and 17th of September in a long-running dispute over pay and working conditions. Boris Johnson has given the green light to build a nuclear power plant on the Suffolk coast, pledging £700 million towards it during what is likely to be his final major policy speech as Prime Minister. He said he was confident that the Sizewell C project will get over the line in the next few weeks. Meanwhile, inspectors from the UN's nuclear watchdog have arrived at the Zaporizhzhia plant in Ukraine. It's after reports of multiple explosions and shelling close to the facility, which caused it to partially shut down. And this summer was England's joint hottest since records began. According to provisional data from the Met Office, the mean temperature was 17.1 degrees Celsius, the same as in 2018. Well, that's all for now. We'll have more later this evening.
Welcome back to Drive with myself and Richard. Thank you very much for all your calls, all your top tips on spiders. We've been talking about the decline of the traditional family, and now we're going to move on to a really important topic, and that is the long-term, the kind of hangover from the pandemic when it comes to care homes and care home residents. Now, this is a subject I feel really passionate about. I don't have any relatives in a care home, thankfully, but I really feel for people who do, and for those residents themselves who were so horrendously isolated, supposedly for their own good, during the lockdown, cut off from the only thing in many cases that made their lives still meaningful and worth living. And you might think, mightn't you, that now the pandemic is well and truly over and COVID is no longer a daily risk to care home residents or the rest of us, that life would have returned to some semblance of normality in all care homes, and that relatives would be freely able to visit their loved ones once again. Well, you would hope that, wouldn't you? And I just had a sense that this wasn't happening. Rich and I were both picking up indications that there were still care homes that were making life very difficult for family members that want to come and visit residents. So we asked for people's experiences, and sure enough, in came the messages that this is very much the case, that care homes are still putting up major barriers to residents seeing their loved ones and routinely locking down their facilities whenever there is a case of COVID, which frankly is no longer the life-threatening condition for the vast majority of people that it was. Now, of course, care home residents are very vulnerable, but we hope that most have been vaccinated. So we are very lucky to now be able to talk to the daughter of a care home resident. This is Melanie on the line, who has first-hand experience of how this is playing out. Melanie, thank you very much for joining us.
Hi.
Now, you responded to my shout out today, saying that you've got your mother, I think, in a care home somewhere in.
Yes, I do.
That's in the northeast. Tell us what's been happening there. First of all, was she in that care home during the worst of the pandemic?
She was. Yes, she's been in for 4 years. The first 2 years, great, no problems at all. We treat the place just like her home. Yes. We visited every opportunity we had. All the family did, as did her friends, and extended family all visited. Just popped in maybe for 10, 15 minutes. It made all the difference.
Of course.
Then, so that was for 2 years. It's been obviously the last 2+ years that she's lived there during a pandemic, which has been very, very, very different.
And for how long were the periods during which you were unable to see her and she effectively had no visitors at all during the pandemic? Was that for a matter of months, or did you manage to find a way to see her?
We went down into lockdown, I think it was March.
That's right.
The first time I saw her after that was August. That was with a mask across a table and a window.
I mean, this is just utterly sickening. I can't see any justification for it. It really, anything could have happened to your mother during that time. You're reliant on the hard-working staff to report back, but there's nothing like you, the daughter, the family, to see how your family member is doing. You're the one that knows her best and know how she's faring.
That's right. She has advanced dementia, so we'll never really know how much this has affected her. It will always be she's gone downhill hugely. She doesn't recognise anyone. If she recognises me, it's sort of a fleeting moment of joy in her face, which goes quite quickly. And I'll never know how much was due to this, but, I think it's a very, very large amount has been due to lockdown.
And Melanie, what's the position now with the restrictions?
So now we still have to... I'm classed as her essential caregiver. So in theory, I can pop in any time, which I do try to. But obviously, as the only person, it's very isolating as to visit my mum because she's got dementia. So there's not really any conversation. It's nice to have somebody with you. I try to go in as much as I can, but if you're not an extended caregiver, which includes my dad, her husband, who is not an essential caregiver, you have to use an online booking system. Right. The booking system gets booked up really, really quickly, well in advance, so it could be 4 or 5 days. So really, we have to know what we're doing to go and plan a visit. It has to all be planned. We used to have the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren used to pop in and see her. They don't go in now. So the other residents have suffered too because some of them don't have family. We would have been their family.
So just to be clear, are you allowed to go in more than... Can 2 and more of you go in, or is it restricted to limited numbers if you book properly?
2 and more can go in, but you need to book. It needs to be booked in advance. And actually, the online booking system only allowed for 2 people to go in. I think that is getting a little bit slack, although we haven't had official advice about that. I think that if 3 turned up, they may let you in, but it's still very, very much restricted.
So have you asked, when is this going to go back to normal? Can't we just go back to how things were? Have you asked that question, and what kind of response do you get? Yeah,
time and time again. I've emailed the care home, and if you try to email the company who run the care home, they put you onto the care home, who say it's the company, so we can't change the rules. Yeah. So we're just... And to be honest, our extended friends and family, they just find it too difficult to go in. They just don't anymore. Yeah. And the only person she sees, it's like the care home staff or her family now. Yeah, I mean, this is really sad because I'm her daughter.
It's an utter tragedy, isn't it? And I feel that these are the forgotten victims of the pandemic, and it isn't just those individuals themselves, those patients, those residents in the care homes. It is the families that are going through the agony. I mean, I cannot tell you how much it would enrage me if I was if I was being forced to go through some overloaded booking system to see a frail elderly relative. I think I'd be climbing through the windows of that building if I had to get to see a loved one.
And my mum's 90. She's lived through so much, and this is the last few years of her life.
Of course, it's just so unfair. And Melanie, are you still having to wear a mask, or have they been done away with?
Only recently, I would say. It was about 3 weeks ago when I turned up. They said you can refuse to wear a mask. To be honest, I'd been going in and just taking it off because she doesn't recognise me without a mask on. Never mind if I've got my face covered. But so often I'd be sitting with her and someone would come up and ask me to put it back on, which you know, a lot of people are visiting in rooms as well. You know, it's not the buzzing place it used to be.
It's just such a tragedy for so many of your extended family and friends. And there must be hundreds, millions of people up and down the country potentially suffering and missing out in the way that you and your family are. But really keen to hear actually from listeners and viewers about this, your own experiences, your own thoughts. We need to campaign for this. It is just not good enough.
Thank you so much for sharing, Melanie. It just sounds absolutely awful. I'm really, really sorry for what you're going through, and I really hope that the care home operators, if any of them are listening, please, look, it's over. These people need to see their families.
Yeah, it's been over for a long time.
Yeah, Melanie, thank you so much indeed. That was so powerful and so sad, and it just so unnecessary. It drives me mad.
Yeah, it actually makes me really, really angry. I mean, in some cases, I feel like I know the care home operators are trying to do the right thing. I know that it's been really difficult for them. They probably still worry about being sued. I get that, but humanity has to come first, doesn't it?
It really does. Anyway, thank you, Melanie. That was fascinating. Keep those calls coming in, 0344 499 1000, the tweets and the texts. I've been told off again for getting it wrong. I'll try and get it right now. It's Isabel and me at Drive Time on Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends. We are into the last 15 minutes of Drive Time before we go to the news desk at the top of the hour with Kate McCann. Great messages coming in here about the chat about the traditional family, traditional family in that report from Rachel D'Souza. you want to just look at this one, Isabel?
Yeah, so we've got one here saying when it comes down to it, everybody comes from a mum and dad and has a thirst to know who these people are when not present in life, not necessarily in the house. The problem starts when a parent rejects or checks out on a child, usually the father, and statistically it usually is. And you're so right, you know, the children need to know who that person is and build a relationship and a bond with them, whether or not they are physically present in the house. That may or may not be optimal, but children do need mums and dads in some shape or form, or other family members that can provide those role models. And I think the role model thing is really important.
Without question. And one last one here, the lack of interest, lack of affection, lack of presence can all lead to a perception of rejection in a developing child, leading to behavioural issues further down the line. The strong male role models are so key for boys and girls as well.
I absolutely agree with that, and I think, you know, if you are a single mum bringing up teenage boys, it's really very, very difficult. You know, teenage boys, nature is telling them pretty much to reject their mums. You know, nature is telling them to make their own way. They don't necessarily want to talk to their mums about sort of male problems, and so they do need somewhere else to turn, I think.
We just had another really interesting tweet here on the care homes discussion, Isabel. Care homes have to take advice from the Department of Health and Social Care. If we go against that advice, then our insurance won't cover us for potential claims. So essentially, that's putting the blame at the door
to which the Department for Health and Social Care will say it's only advice, and round and round and round we go.
Yeah, someone needs to show some leadership. We're going to head down to Kent, where Rosemary's on the line. Hi there, Rosemary.
Good evening, Richard and Isabel. Yes, I'm rather hoping I can put Isabel out of her misery.
I doubt it, but I'm all ears.
Well, I too can't stay in a room with a spider. It's a leftover from wartime, being thrown into an Anderson's shelter during the war.
Oh, golly.
There's garden spiders, the big ones.
Yes.
But what I suggest you do is get yourself a fly swat.
Right.
A long-handled fly swat.
Yes.
I mean, I've managed to eradicate most of them.
Okay.
You have to have a good aim.
I'm not sure that's going to rule me out. I'm just going to say it before he does. That's probably going to rule me out, but maybe Richard can do that bit.
The other thing is that mint in the garden, you know, it grows...
Yep, we got a load of that, yep.
Break bits off and put it round the doors and round the windows. They don't like the smell of that either.
OK, yeah, we've heard a bit about mint. Now, that was new one on me,
it seems to work for me.
OK.
So some of the very strong fly sprays will actually paralyse them a bit.
OK.
I mean, I'm sorry to say...
Well, at least they won't be running over my bed or something then. You know, a paralysed spider, I'm afraid, is a good one as far as I'm concerned.
I had one on the bed when I was about 7 months pregnant.
I never forgot.
And I don't know how I got out so fast.
So I have to say I woke up one night about a month ago and I turned on the light and there was one on my pillow. It was awful. It wasn't a huge one, thank goodness, but I didn't sleep for the rest of the night.
No, I'm not surprised. We're in good state. Adam Faith apparently also had a fear of them, again because of Anderson shelters.
Right, good.
Rosemary, top tips, fantastic. We need a fly swatter. I think with an extended handle. I just don't think a normal one would work for you. It's just not going to cut it. Thank you for that, Rosemary. We're going to head to Stephen in Manchester. Hi there.
Hi there. I was a teacher, supply teacher in Greater Manchester, well, extended down to Derbyshire and up to Lancashire, for 21 years. And I have a few comments on Chris McGovern and the idea of the Campaign for Real Education, which actually I'm quite enthusiastic about. From my own kind of worm's eye experience, I think that there are three things that schools are often doing wrong that they could easily turn around. One of them, I noticed through the years, and it was, one strong head to 10 weak heads, let's put it that way, as a ratio. I've seen schools, very rare, but I've seen schools turn from absolutely, an obliterated landscape in terms of discipline and poor behaviour. I've seen them turn under the hand of a strong head in a breathtaking way. And so the first thing is strong heads who every detail, get yourselves in line, get your shirt tucked in, get your tie sorted, don't look at me that way, lad. That works. Strong heads equate with strong performance. The other thing that I noticed, I have to say, you've been talking about the family. Whenever I went into an area where the schools were from traditionally structured areas that were family friendly in the traditional sense, a mum, a dad cleaving together in the traditional wedlock sort of scenario, the behaviour was much better. As you progressed into the inner cities where there was more fractious sort of family circumstances, broken families, something that I'd witnessed as a housing officer for many years prior to going back into education, there with weak families you got poor behaviour, poor concentration and relatively poor ability to proceed. So, you know, for me, that's the other ingredient, strong traditional families. I would like to say there that I think that divorce and the option to separate is far too easy. Where children are concerned, family should be much more supported, and we need things like transferable tax allowance and so on to encourage traditional family.
So those are really good points. I probably disagree with you that divorce is too easy. I don't think it's easy. I don't think it's a route that anyone goes down lightly. It's a pretty horrendous process for all concerned and generally only undertaken when everybody is at the end of the road. But I do agree with you that it's just common sense, isn't it, that two happy parents are going to bring up happier children, probably.
One of the problems in the inner cities is that many people don't go down the road of matrimony in the first place.
Right.
They're very fractured relationships.
Yep.
But finally, may I say that something I saw brought in by Ed Balls and the Labour Party that this succession of governments stuck with was the use of unqualified staff in school. I mean, it was quite remarkable. It largely went unnoticed. But, you know, I mean, I remember one day going in, taking over for a longer-term cover geography sort of thing, from a lady who'd been a nice lady. She'd been a dinner lady. And this lad said to her, where's Africa on that? There was a big map, a physical map of the world with no names on the wall. And he said, where's Africa on there, miss? And she said, oh, I'm not sure. I think it's this one. I had to correct her and say, well, that does look a bit like it, I must admit, but no, that's South America. This is Africa.
Stephen, you're so right. Thank you very much for those thoughts. And in a sense, your point about the, discipline is so right. With policing, it's like the broken windows policy, but also, every little sort of detail matters with the head and the heads of departments as well. That was Stephen in Manchester. Great call. Thank you very much indeed. We've just got time for Sharon, who's down in Kent, I think. Hi, Sharon.
Hi, Richard. Hi, Isabel.
Hello.
Hello. It's a quick one, Isabel, on the spider situation, because I was exactly like you.
I like the use of the word was. Does that mean you've recovered?
What helped me incredibly was the Friendly Spider programme at London Zoo.
Okay. Where do I do that?
Well, I got in touch with them. I looked them up online. I got in touch with them. I made an appointment. There is a cost.
Right. Don't care. I'm all in.
I was a quivering wreck when I went in the door. I couldn't even say my name. I was so scared. I was crying and had to point to my name. By the end of the afternoon, I was holding a Mexican red-kneed bird-eating tarantula.
Oh my! I'm looking this up. The friendly, what do you call it? The Friendly Spider.
Friendly Spider program.
Oh, I see it. I see it.
Amazing.
I'm doing it. This is the zoo one.
Yes. Yeah. At London Zoo, they were incredible. And now, I don't love them. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I still don't want them in the house.
It helps.
But it taught me how to calmly remove them.
Deal. Okay, I'm in. Okay, and I'm going to report back when I've done it.
Do.
I need all the help I can get.
Enough.
This is what's happening.
Sharon, that's fantastic. That is the. It's a fantastic tip. It's the top tip. It could may well be, get the best tip of the whole 3-hour session. Thank you very much for that, and all of the other messages and ideas. But Shirley doesn't agree. Spiders do so much good. Leave them alone, says Shirley. I think you'd like to leave them alone.
Can I just say that the Friendly Spider programme is now sold out for 2022. We have to check back here for next year.
Well, there we are.
I'm on the waiting list.
Yeah. Anyway, coming up, of course, after the news, we're on to the news desk, and then it's Jeremy Kyle at 8 o'clock. Thanks for being with us and for listening and watching over Drive Time with Isabel and myself. It's been great fun being with you. Thanks to